Okay, welcome to this virtual meeting of the Environment and Neighbourhood Committee on the 1st of October 2020 at 7 p.m. My name is Councillor Manuel Abelan, Chair of the Environment and Neighbourhood Committee, and the Vice Chair is Councillor Ben Andrew. He will take over the chairing of the meeting should I lose connection at any point. A bit of housekeeping: this meeting is being live streamed and a recording will be available following the meeting. Before we begin, I want to mention a few key points so that we have a good meeting. So when you're not speaking, could you please mute your microphone so that it saves bandwidth? You will appear on the screen when your microphone picks up a sound, so this will save the stream cutting to different members suddenly. I'm going to allow plenty of time for members to speak on items. And I shall make this very clear as we move through the agenda. This is not an American presidential election debate, so please everyone speak only when I call you to do so, and we'll have a more constructive debate. When you speak, please turn your camera off. Camera on, if you're happy to do so. When you speak for the first time, if you could state your name clearly before you begin. Councillors should introduce themselves with their title and name. Officers should state their name and title as well. You don't need to do this every time, but just the first time you speak. If you want to raise a point during the meeting, please use the chat box found in the top right of your screen, where you can type question or debate or point of order during the meeting. I'll be keeping a close look on it and bring you to speak when it's your turn. Finally, we have several items with public speakers this evening, so we are going to need to adjourn several times to bring people in and out of the meeting. This is a sort of virtual equivalent of when people come to the chair to speak to the committee and then they go back to the public gallery. This is the reality of 2020. So I'll make it clear to members when this is happening. As we begin this meeting, I shall ask the clerk to confirm which members are present and if we have any apologies for absence. As this is being done, can I ask members to please comment in the chat box if they wish to declare an interest, which we can come in a moment. Cassie, would you like to confirm who is present?
Thank you, Chair. I can see the following members are present: Councillor Abelan, Councillor Andrew, Councillor Clare, Councillor Cook, Councillor Dwight, Councillor Green, Councillor Shields, Councillor Stoneman, Councillor Whitehead, and Councillor Zukowska. And we also have Councillor McCoy present in her role as Chair of the Housing, Economy and Business Committee for Agenda Item 7. And I can also see no declarations of interest, so I'll pass back to the Chair.
Thank you. I think Councillor McCoy is here for items 7 and 8 in her capacity as Chair of HEB. So she'll join in from item 7. Thank you, Cassie. We now move to the minutes of the previous meeting. Members, can we approve the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 11th of March 2020? I'll allow you a bit of time to indicate or in the chat or just give me a thumbs up. Yeah, thank you, Tony. Thank you, Ben. Okay. So the minutes, thank you. I shall take the minutes as approved, and I will sign these minutes outside of the virtual meeting after the social distancing restrictions are lifted. We move to item 5 now, any urgent business. I have accepted the petition regarding street cleaning and refuse collection in Hagbridge as an urgent item for this meeting. We will hear this petition straight after the Safer Active Greener Streets scheme petition and the petitions. Is there any other urgent business from members? No. Fantastic. So we're going to go straight onto item 6, which is the petitions regarding the Safer Active Greener Street scheme. Before we begin this item, I would like to ask that we adjourn for a few moments to allow the petitioners, I believe it's for them, to enter the meeting. Instructions provided to them by committee services.
Manuel?
Yes, Tony?
Nothing's coming up. I'm trying to follow this on the council streaming, and it's showing nothing at all. It's a blank black page.
Cassie, do you want to, or Mr. Stickley? I don't know if he's on the chat. Could we just make sure that the stream is working? I know there's a lot of interest for this item. I want to make sure that everyone can listen properly.
Manuel?
Hi, Chair. Sorry, hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah.
And see me. Yeah, apologies. There was a slight delay at the start with a bit of a hiccup with the stream. The stream is now live on the council's website and on YouTube as well. Sorry, I had a bit of
Cassie or Vicky, do you mind? Do you mind muting? Because we can. Do you mind just muting for a second? We can hear in the background. I want to make sure that everyone can.
Sorry, Vicky. I've just muted you there because I was getting a bit of feedback. So yeah, so I've just done that. Yeah, apologies, councillors. There was a slight issue with the stream at the start of the meeting. I've got it resolved now. The meeting is live both on the council's website and via YouTube. So whichever way a person navigates to the meeting, they'll be able to access the live stream. We're live currently.
Fantastic. I can see Mr. Johnson on the meeting. Welcome. I can see Vicky Stewart as well. You're very welcome, Vicky. I can see Mr. Taylor as well. You're also very welcome. And I don't know if John Keys is in yet. We'll give him a couple of moments.
For the record, Manuel, I've got it up on YouTube now. But so if we could perhaps direct people, mind you, they've got to find it to be directed, haven't they?
Is it the YouTube type of channel we've used for previous meetings?
Yeah. YouTube seems live. The actual council internal channel doesn't seem to, unless on a standard home antiquated PC. Just for reference.
I think Ryan, Councillor Stoneman, also indicated that it's down on his computer.
I think, Chair, I apologize. I think there's a bit of a lag with me having updated the stream, so it may be that people just need to press refresh. But I've just double checked. I've got the tech here. The meeting is live on YouTube, and it is live, available via the council's website as well. And I think we heard from Ms. Stewart a minute ago. You could hear the stream in the background.
That's fine. I think we're missing one of the petitioners, Mr. John Keys. So do you want us to give him a minute before we kick off?
I think if we just give Cassie a moment to try and get in touch with him again, because she has emailed him, but right on cue. There we go.
There we are. Hi, John. You're very welcomed. So if I could just ask the petitioners, it's just common practice in council meetings, if you could mute your microphone when you're not speaking, it'll just help with the making sure we hear, we don't get feedback and we hear everyone. So if you could mute, and then you can unmute when it's your turn to speak. So we'll get going. So once again, welcome to the petitioners and to everyone listening, hopefully on a YouTube or council stream that is working well. I'll ask first an officer to briefly introduce this report, and then we'll move on to the petitioners who will then present to us. Mr. Latham, I believe you're presenting.
Thank you very much, Chair. As you've indicated, this will be a brief introduction to the officer report in response to the petitions. I'm just going to highlight some key points in that report, and then Chair, we'll move on to hear from the petitioners. In the report, we've summarised the context of the schemes that have been implemented in Sutton. We've reflected on the period of lockdown when many people in Sutton and elsewhere commented about how the lower volumes of traffic on their local roads had an impact on the quality of their life. We have explained in the report how the opportunities also arisen to implement schemes which incentivise parents and their children to walk and cycle to school. That's the School Streets programme. We've also set out the funding context in the report. It was clear in April that TfL, Transport for London, was suspending all other funding streams, and then announced at the beginning of May the London Street Space Plan. In parallel, the government, through the Department for Transport, was working up an active travel programme, and both the government department and TfL enabled councils to bid for resources in a very tight time frame. And the key point I want to emphasise for those members who are viewing the report is paragraph 3.2. The timescale for implementation of these pilot schemes was under 3 months, and I have referred in the report to the usual process we follow when we are considering implementation of highway schemes, which involves consultation, normally involving local committees, and the overall process from inception through to implementation can be at least 12 months and often up to 18 months. So we're looking at a very different time frame here, and the guidance both from HM government and from TfL was that the 6 months of what are called experimental traffic management orders is the period when consultation about the impact of the schemes would take place, with amendments being made in light of the experiences from residents reported to us. I set out in the report the detail of the 5 low traffic area schemes. I won't run through those in detail. It's set out in the report, the reasons why we proceeded with the 5 schemes that have now been implemented. And I've also explained further about the concept of school streets, where we are in the process of implementing 12 school streets programmes, having worked closely with colleagues in those 12 schools. I set out also in the report, in light of the decision of the Strategy and Resources Committee on the 6th of July, how we have already made amendments to schemes, and in one case ceased work on a scheme, and in another implemented it and then removed it, to demonstrate that in line with the recommendations of Strategy and Resources Committee, as we proceeded with our plans for implementation, we have been listening to views expressed, and we have addressed some changes in some cases. The final thing I really want to emphasise, Chair, before I finish my introduction, is that it's been clear to us as officers that this was an opportunity which it was incumbent upon us to ensure we proceeded with. But I think it is fair to say, and recognised, I think, across the council, that the pace at which officers have worked has meant that in many cases our communication has not been of the standard we would have wished. The final point to emphasise is at the very end of the report, where we do set out that we will be listening during the 6-month period of these experimental traffic management orders. If a scheme doesn't meet its objectives, we will change it. And if it becomes apparent that schemes are not achieving their objectives through the monitoring and the feedback that we receive, we will make changes. And if needs be, Chair, we will consider terminating a scheme. But our position is that as we've implemented these schemes, beginning the monitoring of their impact, we wish to report back to you, as we're recommending in this report, at the January meeting of this committee, on the overall impact of implementation, the feedback we've received, and the plans that we have in the following months of the trial period. Thank you, Chair. I think that's all I wish to say by way of introduction. I'll just invite Mr. Clubb to add anything if he wishes, but otherwise I'll hand back to you.
Nothing to add from me, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Latham and Mr. Clubb. So we'll now move on to our petitioners. I'll first invite you each in turn, and you'll be allowed to speak for up to 5 minutes each. And then we, as a committee, we'll ask you questions for up to 15 minutes, and then we will move to a debate as a committee. So I'll give you the order just so that you can get ready when it's close to being your turn. So we're going to start with Mr. Derek Taylor, a petition on halt all the schemes in the borough. Then we're going to follow with Mr. John Keyes, the petition with regards to Butter Hill scheme in Wellington North. Then we're going to move on to Vicky Stewart Francis, a petition on the Browning Avenue and Ruskin Drive measure in Worcester Park, and finally finish with Mr. Richard Johnson, the petition on the measure that is currently introduced underneath the bridge in Worcester Park as well. So you'll have up to 5 minutes. When it's 5 minutes, I'll give you, I'll let you know so that we can, you can wrap up, and then we can move on to the next petitioner. If I can ask Mr. Taylor to start his 5 minutes, please. You're very welcome, Mr. Taylor.
Mr. Taylor, you're on mute.
If you want to unmute yourself, if you just put your cursor at the bottom of the screen, you should see a little bar that pops up, and you should see a little microphone. It's the first button on the left.
Oh, hello. Sorry.
There you go. That's fine.
It's on my phone, so it's.
No worries. You're very welcome. Over to you for 5 minutes.
Yeah. So my petition was for the removal of all the schemes from within the borough. I know there are separate schemes to individual schemes, but I think my first point, I had a few points that I wanted to raise. My first point is the worrying reply there from Simon Latham that basically stated about changing the schemes with only under extreme duress would they be removed. My understanding was that if the schemes were a failure, they would be removed. I think the volume of people responding to the petition proves that nobody wants them. I think it's 1 in 10 is in favour of them. I think that's a very high majority of the borough that don't want them. We as residents and myself and a number of other residents have constantly been asking yourself, Mr. O'Bannon, for statistics and traffic flow data and air quality data, and none has been forthcoming on any scheme. The only data that I can find on the Sutton Council website relates to Grinner Road, Elgin Road and Ben Hill Wood Road, and that's from 2017. But at no point in that consultation do you actually say, do you want us to close your road as a solution to these problems? because I can guarantee that probably, again, 90% of the people would say no. No one wants to be cut off from one side of their town to another, or one side of their community to another. Obviously, with the current COVID situation, where a lot of people are working from home, the statistics that you do garner from any monitoring that you do now are going to be jaded, because a lot of people are working at home. I am currently working at home, as many others are. A lot of people have been made redundant and lost their jobs. So there are going to be statistically a lot less traveling right now as opposed to what there would have been in January. So I don't think, unless you have immediate statistics from maybe sort of March, April, and some now, I think your statistics, anything that you come up with, is going to be very much lower than what it should be, based on that. I've also seen, obviously, on the council's website, on the Twitter feeds, there's a lot of crossed information about what these schemes are actually aiming to do. There is, from yourself, Mr. Bellin, a tweet that you say you want to test by removing cars merging from side streets onto main roads, and traffic can be improved. I think the answer there, the fact that the traffic is backing up to the Morden Road in Cheam from Worcester Park, I think your test has immediately failed. I don't think there's any qualms about that at all. If you're trying to suggest that you push traffic to your bypass, well, that's already a busy road. I don't think they need any additional traffic. I don't think it's a solution. Going on to sort of my next point, All Saints Road closure. You say that there was doubts about that closure from the beginning. Is there a written paper trail for that? Because in all of the minutes of the meetings that I've read, no one mentions that there is doubts against that. Do we just have to take your word for it? Or is there some proof that you could provide us that that is the actual case, that there was doubts in your head? It seems to have only taken, I think, 217 signatures on a petition and 5 days to have that removed. Does that set the standard for the rest of the closures and the rest of the implemented schemes? Because if that's the case, they should really all be removed right now. There are considerably more people objecting to Worcester Park, to Butter Hill, to the whole of the schemes in general, than there were to All Saints Road. Excuse me, sorry. On my next point, you stated on your council column, you stated that you were working with communities and working with groups. Could you share with us what groups and what communities you have worked with and looking forward to consulting to? Because I think other than this forum now that we're getting, I don't think anyone else has seen anything that you've consulted with anybody other than the Get Stuck in Cycling group, and the information that is available from their groups. To be honest, it's quite horrifying.
It's been 5 minutes, so if you just conclude your remarks.
Right, okay. I had some questions to ask. Which should be hopefully a simple yes or no. Do you have road traffic data and air quality data for all of the schemes that you have implemented? And that's a yes or no answer.
Okay, thank you for your 5-minute contribution. I will make sure to pick up as many points as I can during the debate a bit later. Thank you. If I could move now to Mr. John Keyes for 5 minutes as well. Bottom of the screen, John. If you just put your mouse towards the bottom of the screen, you'll see.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've just got that.
Perfect. You're very welcome. Over to you.
Okay. Good evening. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself, although some of you will already know me. My name is John Keyes, and I'm here to represent the residents in Butter Hill and the surrounding roads. Before I start, I would like to thank you for letting me address the committee about the Butter Hill Bridge closure. and the related petition. I've lived in the area for most of my life, and I was even born in the house where Councillor Gordon is living now. With that, I feel I have a much better idea than most about this area. I was also the ward councillor for Wallington North in 1998 to 2002. I would like to start by saying that the Butter Hill scheme was put into place on September the 21st. It was implemented without any consultation with residents about the intentions of the scheme. Thus, as you can imagine, this has got residents' backs up, and they're obviously now very disappointed in the local council and councillors who voted this through unopposed. Elliot Corbyn, LMP, was also disappointed about the lack of consultation and has since done a survey regarding this. Initially, there was a lot of rage coming from the residents towards councillors and Sutton Council, giving their own ideas of what suited them best. People who used Rose and Crown End wanted the Bridge End closed, and people who used Bridge End wanted Rose and Crown End closed. Therefore, we decided as a resident representative group to do a bit of research. We went door to door, we talked to people in the streets it affects, and we had a look at the large, bigger picture. A petition was carried out about the road closure by Lois Jenkins, who is an Arcadia Road resident, which was then submitted to you for your consideration, and hence why I'm here today. When the petition was submitted to the committee back in August, it had 325 signatures. Last time I checked, it had 634. Butter Hill was a crucial route to alleviate pressure on the already overloaded High Street for local residents trying to get home. But since closure, North Street, Mill Lane, Shorten High Street and Manor Road and London Road appear to bear the brunt of the traffic, with severe delays adding to pollution, which in turn is doing the opposite of your intentions and making the roads greener. On Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, there was roadworks in Shorten High Street, which has added to chaos and congestion. Residents have been told that this scheme will give us better air quality. We've asked numerous times for the figures. We've now had to resort to getting an FOI request. Surely we could have the data tonight, couldn't we? Increased congestion in Shorten High Street and Hatbridge is adding a significant amount of time onto our journeys already, with Boris guidelines already encouraging office workers to work from home where possible. We aren't seeing the full impact of the road closure yet, and it's already made a big impact on travel, especially for those who have to get to local hospitals and doctors from here. We now have to go via Shorten High Street. It really isn't good enough for elderly and vulnerable residents, is it? Who've had their journey times doubled or trebled. Would you like to see your residents suffer? I certainly don't. You might, I don't. There have been issues with viewing signage as well in the area because we've got signs underneath trees. I hope they will be cut back soon. There's been an increase in the number of cyclists on the road recently, I agree, but since COVID-19 started and lockdown stopped us from doing anything else. But recently people are going back to work, and so there's not too many on the roads now. Winter months coming, that's going to reduce as well. Following on from this, the road closure has impacted residents in Arcadia Close because motorcycles are now using this as a cut through. Very dangerous. Lois nearly got run over there. I hope a child doesn't. Another one to mention is our local shops on Butter Hill, which is called All Sorts. It's in danger of going out of business now because people can't pull in. It can't get to residents from Mill Lane, Strawberry Lane, Denmark Road, can't get over the bridge to it. So please think of the local shops that we are desperately trying to save since COVID. Losing this shop will be devastating for the elderly residents and for residents of this area. Residents, I stress, do not have the option of taking other routes, so we need something put in place. Please consider these points and find an alternative to disclosure. According to the survey conducted by the MP, 77% of residents think the residents' access at both ends would be a solution, which we know is possible as this is in practice in other streets in the borough. This would perhaps alleviate some of the traffic on the surrounding roads, as well as keeping residents happy and on board with your scheme. We're talking to the local shopkeepers. They are currently trying to find alternative ways to help local residents, such as a delivery service with a small surcharge. They would need the bridge open to be able to do this, or resident access. Please listen to us, local residents of the Butter Hill area. We've lived here for many years, and please, just scrap the scheme, or at the very least, just give us full resident access. This is what the people want and need. As I'm writing this speech, which was yesterday, there was a Lib Dem PPB on, and they said that they will be on the side of residents. So please, Lib Dem MPs and councillors tonight, there's more of you here than anything else. Please prove this and give us resident access or scrap the scheme and listen to your leader. Thank you for listening, Chair.
Thank you, John, and spot on 5 minutes. Well done. The next petitioner is Vicky Stewart Francis. Vicky, over to you.
Yep. Okay, good evening. I'm here to talk on behalf of the 3,151 residents, 84% of local businesses who signed the petition to stop Browning Avenue busgate. Like many other local residents, I only found out about the scheme through Facebook. I live 2 roads away and still haven't received any official information. The lack of transparency and communication from the council, alongside the refusal to consult, has left residents feeling frustrated and disregarded. Hundreds have sent emails to councillors expressing concerns. Many are still awaiting a response. Not all residents are on Twitter, so when information or updates are shared to the council, by the council, this should be communicated via official channels. The petition was submitted on the 20th of August, and to our astonishment, residents received a letter dated the 19th acknowledging the petition, but confirming that the scheme will go ahead on a trial basis. Our views have been dismissed before we were even heard. We've been told there was no time to consult, but we've seen documents from meetings between councillors and the Get Sutton cycling group. You consulted with them. There was more than enough time to consult with residents. In the new Lib Dem leader's first speech, he said it's time for us to start listening, but this hasn't been the case. 3,151 people are telling you that they don't want the busgate, and you're still not listening. Data provided for the scheme was incorrect. We were told 2,000 cars an hour drove down Browning Avenue, which was wrong. With no faith in the council's ability to provide accurate data or traffic counts for air quality. Any data collected during the pandemic will be flawed. It can't reflect pre or post-pandemic volumes of traffic or pollution levels. Moving on to the implementation of the scheme, which has been almost as poor as the communication. The signs went up on the 20th of September and were covered in black plastic. On the morning of the 21st, they were still covered. There were no road markings, but the busgate was operational. At lunchtime, 2 camera signs were installed in the fine zone. There were supposed to be 2 bollards to narrow the road. 10 days later, and they're still not there. You say this isn't a money-making scheme, but the main camera signs are seen too late, causing danger when cars try to reverse or U-turn. With the busgate half finished and the signage so poor that people are constantly driving through it, why hasn't the scheme been delayed? Given that the council were forced to deliver schemes by the end of September, we're now in October, will Sutton Council be returning the money to TfL, or has the deadline now changed? In trying to improve the volume of cars on one road, all you've done is increase it on at least 2 others. Ruskin Drive now takes the entire flow of traffic from and into Dorchester Road, with queues struggling to turn right onto the already congested and dangerously polluted Central Road. Lindsay Road residents have noticed more cars travelling and at higher speeds. One resident's vehicle has even been hit twice in the last week. A resident even witnessed a moped mount the pavement to avoid the busgate. We know there are problems with Browning Avenue, but the busgate doesn't stop speeding, doesn't make the road safer for cyclists or pedestrians, or lower pollution. It's shocking that this experiment has cost in the region of £40,000. We've heard from ward councillors that if other roads suffer negative impacts, that they can apply for more funding to make further improvements. Does this mean closing more roads to local residents or putting in a school street at Dorchester Primary, a road that has many side roads off it and the S3 bus running along it? Local residents are not rat runners. There is no data for the area regarding where people are travelling to, and we cannot car share at the moment due to the pandemic. Many Worcester Park roads link from one to another, so for some, using side roads is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Your online consultation is appalling. It asks things like, to what extent do you support the principles of making changes to our streets to make them safer, active and greener? Who would say that they don't agree with that? Residents are backed into a corner, and you'll use the data to say that the busgate is a success. We want to be able to give unbiased feedback. To sum up, we still feel like we're being ignored. You only listen to those that you choose to listen to or that agree with you. And the others are made to feel quite insignificant or worse, like a vocal minority. The way Sutton Council has treated us is undemocratic. Councillors are elected to work with and listen to their constituents. This isn't happening, and that's just not good enough. You dropped the York Road scheme. You removed the All Saints Road scheme. We listened to over 3,000 local residents calling on you to remove the busgate and consult with them before new schemes are put in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart. If I can now move on to Richard Johnson bottom up. Yeah, there you go.
Sorry, Chair, got you.
That's right. There you go. Over to you.
Thank you. According to Sutton Council's local plan, 80% of residents live in areas with a petal level of from 0 to 2 out of a possible 6. Hardly surprising, as Sutton is one of the few London boroughs without a tube station. Remote suburban Worcester Park, on the edge of the borough and bordering Surrey, is worse off than most. There's no direct railway line joining us to the major towns of Sutton, Kingston, Morden or New Malden. And whilst there are several bus routes, all are notoriously slow moving due to a lack of road capacity along the critical path of the A2043. The reality is that for most people, a car is not an option, it's the only practical option. Therefore, surely the focus for Sutton Council is keeping all forms of private and public transport on the A2043 corridor moving, minimising delays, idling and emissions. Even 60 years ago, a dual carriageway was needed under Worcester Park Railway Bridge, which opened in 1962. Your imposition of a reduced road capacity to a single lane on this critical stretch of the critical route was colloquially known as Conegate. Any layman could see no good would come of it, occurring at a time when the entire community was at its most vulnerable and avoiding public transport. The inevitable immediate result was a tailback of traffic for up to 2 miles from New Malden to North Cheam. This is rarely, if ever, seen during the summer holidays, especially given so many of us were furloughed, working from home or in isolation. As a direct result of the harebrained blocking of the A2043 corridor, residents took to the back streets to try and avoid the chaos. Rat runs aren't natural. Nobody chooses to add extra time to their journey, or to burn extra fuel, or to create extra pollution. The reason residents and commuters sought other routes was because Conegate brought Central Road to a halt for almost 100 days. Removing Conegate, as you've done, therefore remove much of the rat run traffic, negating the need to prevent it with a bus gate. Ironically, imposing a bus gate now has merely created a rat run around it, forcing through traffic on the busy A2043 to be merged with additional local vehicles. This creates a previously unseen three-way blockage on the junction of Cheam Common Road and Ruskin Drive. Once again, unnecessarily meddling only serves to hinder rather than help transport of all types along the critically important A2043 arterial route. One claimed success of Conegate was a huge increase in cyclists. However, FOI requests reveal that the claim is based on 2 inconsistent sets of data. The before data was gathered manually, counting cyclists in springtime, but the after data was collected by automatic counting wires in the widened cycle lanes. This empty rat run under the bridge attracted not just fair weather summer cyclists, but also mopeds, motorcycles and powered scooters. Inevitably, a substantial but superficial increase was recorded. While consultation for profitable CPZs in Worcester Park carried on during lockdown, by contrast, measures such as Conegate were imposed as an emergency. It is notable that this included a one-way scheme in Lincoln Road. Previously rejected as impractical and damaging by a public consultation, it was merely recycled and imposed upon us without one. Conegate was a disaster and never should have happened. Obviously failing within hours of its introduction, it was a duff concept that should have been removed soon after, not tweaked with more money for months on end. It should not have required 3,500 people to tell you what an appalling project failure this was. Had the waste of public funds led to other agenda-driven schemes being abandoned, this would have been something. But we seem to have a council that either cannot or chooses not to learn from failed experiments with other people's money. I urge you to focus on the needs of the 200,000 people in this borough, not the wants of the 14 members of Get Sutton Cycling. Lastly, with government funding on the table, the brief window of opportunity to enhance transport in the borough was lost. Instead, as a list of failed, failing and cancelled projects grows, it seems the gift horse was looked in the mouth. Most worryingly, the likelihood of government funding being withdrawn for unsuccessful streams like Conegate seems increasingly likely. I doubt retaining the folly of the Browning Avenue bus gate will impress the Transport Secretary. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. If you could just mute your microphone just to avoid feedback, that'd be good.
Sorry, Chair, I'm trying.
Yeah, no worries. Oh, that's the camera gone.
Yeah. Oh.
You can keep it on if you want. There you go. Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you for your presentations and for addressing the committee. I ask members, so we're going to go into, for up to 15 minutes, into questions to the petitioners. If I could just emphasize the word questions, we're going to have a half an hour debate after this Q&A with the petitioners. I really want to hear as much as possible from them rather than from councillors. So if you can keep your questions short and no statements, please. We can do that when we have our chance to debate. So I'll try to get as many councillors as possible to ask questions. I'll make sure that I'd like to make sure that everyone gets a chance to ask at least one question before I come back to another member. So if you could just indicate in the chat that you would like to speak, and if you could let me know who the question is directed to, that would be great. So I'll start with Councillor Ben Andrew, who has a question for John Keyes.
Hi, can you hear me okay, John? Is that thumbs up?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Fab. Thank you so much for your presentation. I just wanted to pick up on the point about resident access, because it's a really interesting point. But I was wondering, because obviously I can see the benefits for some of the residents in Butter Hill and the roads off Butter Hill of them being able to enter and exit at the bottom end, not just the Rose and Crown end. But my concern is for residents on Mill Lane, Strawberry Lane, Denmark Road. It would essentially be saying to them, well, you can't go up Butter Hill that way because, you know, we're going to close it off for residents. But Butter Hill residents, they can still cut through your roads. So I would find it hard to justify that to them, because it would basically be opening up for another sort of 1,000 residents to still cut through their roads, but not vice versa. I just wanted to know if you sort of saw my point at all on that, and if you had any reflections on ways we could mitigate against that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Andrew. It's actually an interesting point, because I was actually talking to Councillor Gordon at the weekend, and she actually backs a plan for having the Butter Hill resident access, also Strawberry Lane, Denmark Road, Mill Lane. She actually backs all three roads. It's something we're obviously looking at, but we thought that to start with, we're trying to, obviously, we don't want to put every amount of cars back over to Butter Hill Bridge, but at the moment, for us here, we're trapped. We can't get out. We want to get to St Hilliers Hospital. We want to get to my local GP surgery at Greenrive Surgery. I'm with a disabled mother here at the moment. It's taken me 3 times as long to get to St Hilliers Hospital. That to me is breaking my heart. This could be an emergency for us. It's just not good enough. But I do get your point about the extra traffic from there. But as I say, Councillor Gordon is behind us with this, and she wanted those extra roads included, which I personally wouldn't have a problem if it gets us the access back over the bridge.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you. I'm going to take one question from the administration and one from the opposition. I've seen that the next one that indicated was Councillor Żukowska, but I'll start with Councillor Dwight first, and then I'll go to Councillor Żukowska, if that's okay.
Lovely, thanks, Chair. Vicky, thank you for joining. So to Derek, Richard, Vicky, and to John as well, I just want to thank you all for coming along this evening. It's been, I've heard from you what I've heard from many residents, and I'm really grateful, and I hope the administration are listening. So Vicky, some of the prime things that the council has said they'd like to get from this, from these schemes, are to make the area more pleasant and safer, to reduce air pollution, to reduce traffic levels and speed. So we've definitely seen a reduction in speeding, because everyone is crawling along our local roads. On top of that, Councillor Abelan, as he knows, in the statement on Twitter, and you mentioned communication, which was horrific from councillors, as well as officers, but councillors can't shift the blame on that. But he said that it might take 3 extra minutes to drive to your house. We think that that is good. And most of the schemes we're doing are nothing crazy. So I just wanted to ask, I would ask all 4 of you if I could, but I'm going to ask Vicky, do you agree with Councillor Abelan, the chair of this committee and deputy leader of this council? And do you agree with Sutton Council that they are working in any way? Thank you.
Go on.
Hi. So in terms of the scheme making things safer, at the moment we've not seen that. We've seen cars U-turning, we've seen cars reversing, particularly at school time when the kids are coming out of Dorchester. It's quite a busy area there. And the bus gate at the moment, I'd say it's not promoting safety. Pollution, there are just cars backed up in other roads now. It's just sort of pushed that outwards. Traffic levels, again, like you say, they're kind of crawling, especially struggling to turn out onto Central Road from Ruskin Drive. Lindsay Road, people are still seeing speeding. The bus gate doesn't actually stop you speeding down Browning Avenue. If you want to go to Browning Avenue to speed down the road, you've got the entire length still to do that. You just come up Lindsay Road and just speed down it that way, if that's what you want. Communication has been difficult. And in terms of taking 3 minutes onto your journey, that would be great if it were 3 minutes. But in reality, the feedback that, you know, we've got a group of over 800 members that are local residents on Facebook that are just that, you know, they post videos, photos in, you know, of really what it is like. And 3 minutes, it's not 3 minutes. Some people are saying 20 minutes, half an hour. People are rerouting. Sat navs and Waze are sending people down all sorts of different roads. Yeah, 3 minutes would be great, but it really isn't.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. I'm going to take Councillor Żuchowska next, who has a question for Mr. Taylor, I believe. And then I'm going to take Councillor Shields, who also has, I think, a question for Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to all the petitioners for joining us tonight and for sharing their views on the scheme. And I guess my question could be to all the petitioners, but I will direct it to Mr. Taylor because I know that his petition specifically asks for us to stop all the measures across the borough. So, I mean, as someone who's passionate about this particular issue and someone who's clearly has given quite a lot of thought to this, I wonder if you could perhaps share any thoughts or suggestions that you might have of what the council could and should be doing to reduce traffic on our residential roads, bearing in mind that, you know, car ownership has doubled since 1995, and then traffic on our residential roads, so the C roads, increased by 50% since, I think, 2008.
Okay, thank you. Firstly, I think education. I haven't seen anything within the borough that would promote cycling on these schemes. Nothing says to me, I mean, I'm close to the Easter Avenue Rayfield barrier. That particular barrier, I cycle around that regularly to Nonsuch Park with my 9-year-old. I have cycled on that road with him for at least a year. I've never had a problem. And actually now I cycle on the path with him around that corner because cars come up to the corner, they U-turn, they stop, they sit there, they swear, they get frustrated. The staged photo by Councillor Drew with her kids in the middle of the road, I wouldn't dare let my kids do that. It's just too dangerous. And on any road, barrier, no barrier. I think you need to educate people. I think if you want people to cycle and walk, educate them. I think if you want people to cycle on the roads, first of all, sort out what you've got. You have cycle routes. They're a mess. They're not maintained. They're not looked after. I mean, case in point, the new ones in Sutton High Street, Sutton one-way system going down St Nicholas Way. Those are ridiculous. I would never cycle down that. I will cycle on the road. there are turn-ins in and out of that it's just not safe to cycle down. It's probably the most ridiculous scheme I've seen. But yeah, in answer to your question, you need to educate people. You need to consultate with residents. You need to actually ask residents, speak to residents, have meetings with the residents. I don't think any of the schemes, I mean, I think a lot of the schemes are completely unnecessary for a start. I don't think they're going to actually reduce traffic. I think all they've done is moved it. For example, there's one of the residents of Buxton Road, and she has taken videos of Buxton Road and Rayfield in the morning, and literally for half an hour there is a constant stream of traffic now down Buxton Road. Now, if you know Buxton Road, it's a very narrow, skinny road. It is Buxton and Rayfield are two roads that lots of children walk and cycle along to go to Cheam High, and you've now made those two roads specifically far more dangerous than they ever were to walk, well, definitely to cycle along, obviously to walk along a little bit, because in reality kids are complaining they can't cross the road. It's taken them a while to cross the road because the constant stream of traffic. On those particular roads, this particular resident has been taking counts at 8 in the morning, and between approximately 7:45 and 8:30 in the morning, it's gone up from the first week. Her count was approximately 150 cars in that time, to this week, or sorry, last Friday, the count was 250 cars. So how's that helping anybody? How's that making the air cleaner? How's that making cars off the road? And obviously, Councillor Bellum, one of your favourite tweets is the fumes into bedroom windows. Well, I'm sure the people of Buxton and Rayfield are very, very, very happy with all the fumes going into their bedroom windows. That's all I can say on that one, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Councillor Shields?
Okay, I think I'm on. Good evening, Mr. Taylor. You have a petition which their paperwork in front of us bears 2,490 signatures, but there seems to be another petition which could or may not be the same petition to cease and desist all traffic planned schemes, 3,500 signatures. Can I just very quickly confirm which one of those two figures is correct for you?
The figures that I'm looking at online right now, the petition, I was asked by the council if the petition could be ended because it was being presented today, which I agreed to. That petition has in agreement 3,167 people, and in disagreement with the schemes 375 people. So the percentage on that is 89.4 are in agreement that all the schemes should be halted and removed, and 10% are in agreement that they should stay.
Okay.
Those numbers speak for themselves.
The recommendation to the committee, which I find very odd, with such a sizable petition and the turnaround at All Saints Road with just 277 petitioners seem to become successful. The recommendation to councillors tonight is to note your petition. I think I could substitute that word for ignore your petition.
Yeah.
What do you want this committee to do? We are a decision-making committee, and I think a decision needs to be made. And one of the decisions that is an absolute affront to democracy is to go, yeah, mate, it's okay. We hear what you're saying, and then do nothing.
Exactly. I mean, I think the council's constitution says that you're working for the residents, not working for yourself or your own agendas. And at the moment, if my petition is ignored and the 3,167 people that have signed it are ignored, then in reality, the council is not working for its residents. And that goes for the same for any petition that is put forward today, and any petition that is put forward by any other person. You are talking, these petitions have more votes on them than the council leaders themselves got in their own election.
Oh, yeah.
I think that says a lot. People are passionate about this. People do not want these schemes. They are not welcome. And in reality, they have done nothing. the schemes, you know, if you are trying to make the air quality in the area better, then show me a baseline figure and show me another figure that's actually going to say, yes, we've made improvement there, but show it on every single road that you've done it on all the surrounding roads. I don't believe that data exists. I have asked for it several times. I've done a freedom of information request, which I still haven't had a reply to. In reality, the committee today needs to turn around and go, let's stop wasting money. TfL don't have the money to waste. We've taken it irresponsibly. We've used it irresponsibly. Let's stop. Let's stop now. Let's not continue with these schemes and let's get rid of them. I mean, one of the guarantees of the schemes was that no ambulances, no emergency services would be stopped. The scheme at Rayfield and Esher, one of the residents measured it today, and it isn't wide enough for a fire engine. The scheme on Ben Hill Road, I have a video of ambulances turning round on that road because they could not get through. So I guess I have a question on the basis of that, just on that video. If that ambulance was going to see your mother, your wife, your sister, your daughter, your aunt, your uncle, your cousin, your nephew, whoever, in a critical condition that needed an ambulance, and they were delayed by just 1 or 2 minutes, and that caused their death, is that acceptable? Because if it's not acceptable, then all of these schemes need to come out tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I totally do agree with everything, concur with what you've said. For your information, I am a retired firefighter and seconds count.
Indeed.
Tony, I'm going to move on. We're slightly running out of time, so I really want to make sure we get everyone to at least ask their question. I'm going to go to Councillor Whitehead for a question to John Keyes.
Yes. Hello, welcome, John. It's nice to see you again. I've just got a question about the fact that there's always two sides to an argument, and I'm aware that there are residents in the Butterhill area who live near the bridge who have told me that they're now willing and able to open their windows. They're no longer getting traffic noise and honking and the sound of accelerating cars and speeding traffic, and that it makes a pleasant change because they've had this for some years. I'm also aware of parents with young children taking their children to school who've not been able to very easily cross the bridge when there's been speeding traffic going over the bridge, and they find that a welcome change. So there are two sides of an argument, and I just wondered what your views were about people who welcome the scheme and now find they have a much more pleasant situation because they can now open their windows and they can now take their children to school.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Well, in response to your question, this is why we actually went out and actually saw residents, something our ward councillors didn't do. We also have Elliot Corbyn's survey, which stressed everybody on Butterhill had a vote on that, and it came back overwhelmingly with 77% of people want resident access. Resident access would still allow your people to have their windows open because it would cut down on the amount of traffic that they had going by. That's why we are trying to press ahead for resident access as much as what we are for closure, for scrapping the scheme. But we really would, and what we're trying to go is what residents wanted, which is resident access, which would be the halfway point and make everybody else happy, which I think is what everybody wants. And I don't think you could really go against what 77% of the people want, considering that our councillors haven't even sent out one leaflet to us. So I would go along with what the MP said, and we go with 77% of the people. And that also corresponds with all of our letters we've sent out. We've done surveys, we're doing traffic surveys, we're doing everything we possibly can. Obviously, its own scheme's only just come in, so it's impossible to collate all those together. But I don't think you can argue against 77%. Can you?
Thank you, John. We've run out of time, but I'm going to allow Councillor Green to ask the final question, and then we're going to move on to a debate between councillors.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, John. Nice to see you. I have just one very quick question. I know the Butterhill estate extremely well. Would you say that the majority of residents are elderly residents?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. Yes, they certainly are. I mean, I've got my mother here. She's 84. The man opposite me, I had to go and get shopping for during COVID. He's over his 80s. Through our road, I would say there's probably over 50% of my road alone, which are over retirement age.
So
these people need access.
So therefore, if you were to lose the shop round the corner, where an elderly person can toddle along to get their paper, a pint of milk and bread, not only does the resident lose the facility, but the shopkeeper will go out of business, probably, because he won't get any passing trade, and which would be a terrible shame, because then it'd be another empty shop with no business rate available to the council. So is he in a very parlous state, or do you think he'll manage to turn his life around if nothing happens to change it? I can quite understand, having fought to get on and off Butterhill when my mother-in-law lived there, how difficult it is. And residents only permits would probably be a very good idea. However, knowing the council, you will have to pay for them, because that's what happens with parking controls. So, but I'm more concerned about this poor man losing his business, because I don't think he's going to be alone. I think there's going to be a lot of shops that are going to lose passing trade. So is he going to be able to turn this around, do you think?
Thank you, Councillor Green. No, when we've actually gone in the shop, he's actually been in tears, because he knows that his shop he's takings have so dramatically reduced. It's just not fair. He's done everything throughout COVID for the local people around here. And I just feel that that's why I'm here tonight, mainly. It's because I just feel we've got to do something to help these people. He helped us, and if we could have access over the bridge, it would then get his customers back, because he's even offered to do a delivery service over there. But then he could have Mill Lane, Denmark Road, all those kind of areas. He can't do nothing at the moment. The poor man's got no business now, all thanks to this scheme, which he didn't even know about. He's only just extended his shop a couple of months ago. Nobody knew about this. It's just not fair.
No, it isn't fair. And as Sir Ed Davies said, oh, we Lib Dems are listening. Well, I beg to differ.
Thank you,
Councillor Abelan. That's what I wanted to know.
That's fine. We're going to have a chance to discuss it just now. Can I just ask can I thank the petitioners for your contribution tonight? It was very interesting to hear your points, and then for all the questions. I'm hoping that this is the start of the start of a good conversation, and that we can work with the community to find the best possible solutions. We're going to move on now to the discussion between councillors. So I'm going to ask the petitioners if you could exit the virtual room and follow the debate from the council stream. And I'll give you a minute or two to set yourself up, and then we will begin the debate. So I think we've, that's fine. I'll just give them a few more seconds to join the stream. Mr. Latham and Mr. Clubb, I don't know if you wanted, there was a lot in there, and I think there was a lot of overlapping points between the petitioners. I don't know if you wanted to cover some of them and try to answer some of them before we move on to questions to officers and the discussion between ourselves.
Chair, I think we can and we should. So I think there was one particular point made early on. I think Mr. Taylor's in Mr. Taylor's presentation in his speech about data and the validity of the data and the timeliness of data. And I know Mr. Clubb will want to comment on this too. I think there was reference made to the timing. He said he'd found data in only relation to one scheme, which was the 2017 Sutton North data. What we have done, partly because the impact of COVID, as we know, was to reduce traffic levels. And as I've said already, one of the reasons why, excuse me, we're seeking to implement these schemes now is to build on the quality of life benefits that many residents commented on. But the timeliness of data was quite important. We witnessed an increase in traffic over the summer months as the lockdown eased, as the Prime Minister's message indeed was to return to work. And it's important that we had therefore timely data at the point when we were on the verge of implementing the schemes. So as I think as Mr. Clubb can confirm, we collected that data in the immediate period before implementation, which will act as the baseline, rather than, as I think Mr. Taylor, perhaps it was one of the other petitioners mentioned, looking back to January or February as our baseline. And to be frank, we didn't have that baseline data for January or February to apply in any event. But I think the important point here is we needed to establish an accurate picture based on what I think we perceive to be an increase in traffic flows since the summer, over the summer and into the month of September. And of course, the message from government, from the Prime Minister himself, has also changed recently for reasons that we're all aware. So that's the position on the baseline data on traffic. I don't know if Mr. Clubb wants to comment further on that, just to say more on that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Simon. All four petitioners made the point about data and the validity of it. And I'd just like to say I would completely agree that the data that we're putting out needs to improve. As Simon touched on, we've got historic data that exists for some of the schemes, and that's traffic counts and speeds. The traffic counts for Browning Avenue, for example, were taken at the beginning of September. So we have a baseline to compare any data that we gather in future months to compare it to. Further counts will be taking place in October and November of this year for all 5 schemes. This will enable us to compare to get data that was previously gathered. Once accounts have been completed, we will be in a position to compare and share that data to see whether there has been a reduction in speeds and a reduction in traffic using the roads in the surrounding areas to those 5 schemes. There was also the mention of air quality data. So we have an existing network of diffuser tubes that monitor our main routes. These diffuser tubes aren't in these local traffic areas. What we will do for all of these schemes is we will use vehicle counts and speeds to calculate the impact on air quality at all of these locations. And we will use the traffic data that we already have to calculate an air quality position. And then when we do the traffic counts in October and November, we will use those counts to calculate the impact on air quality. So a number of petitioners touched on the point that air quality may improve in these roads, but it may increase in other roads, whether that's main routes or, I think in the example of Browning Avenue, Lindsay Road and Ruskin compared to Browning. We will be able to compare that, and again, we will share that information along with all the traffic counts that we do, and make sure that we are in a position where we're able to provide that baseline, what's happened now, and then an interpretation of what's happened. So we are absolutely keen to improve the data that we've been producing and make sure that that's available for everybody to view.
Thank you, Mr. Clubb and Mr. Lathan. I'm going to turn over to councillors for the discussion. I'm just picking up who asked first. I'll go to Councillor Steve Cook, who has a question, and then Councillor Shields.
Oh, hi there, Councillor Steve Cook here. Good evening, Simon. I just wanted to go back to check with you. I think Mr. Taylor said in his report that an ambulance had a problem getting through one of the roads. It wasn't wide enough. I just wanted to check. Obviously, we must have discussed this, the LTNs with the emergency services and gone through the whole process with them. Am I right to assume that they were part of the arrangements, and how did they sort of react to this process overall? Thank you.
So you're quite correct, Councillor Cook. Through you, Chair. We consulted the emergency services. Mr. Clubb, I think, has the dates of the emails that went from our service. We received responses on the majority of schemes, I think it's fair to say. We didn't receive objections. We received some issues of concern, and we are committed to maintain dialogue with police, fire brigade and ambulance service through the period, as we're now into that period of implementation, to ensure that we address any issues that they encounter. We were aware, and it was mentioned by Mr. Taylor, of the video which I think was posted on social media. Obviously that is of concern. I think we'd all agree with that an ambulance arrives and has to reverse or is delayed as a result, and we need to make sure we take account of them. But to respond to your initial point, or your main point, there was consultation and we did receive responses, and there were no objections. I think the concerns are ones that require tracking, and we will be in dialogue about those. I don't know if Matt can advise on when those approaches were made. I think it was late June or early July, Matt, but perhaps you could confirm to the committee.
So we approached all the emergency services over a week period in July, in the lead up to the schemes. And as you've touched on, we will continue that dialogue with the emergency services to pick up any issues now that the schemes are live.
It's probably worth adding, Chair, just for the sake of completeness, that there was one specific issue raised by the fire service, and that was in relation to the Butter Hill scheme. And as a result of that, we changed the proposal from a bollard to a camera, because of some specific points they raised in relation to the initial proposals there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. Thanks, Matt.
There's a very quick related question. I'll just get that. We can cover that one now. Around, have we engaged with the waste service, Matt Clubb?
Yes, we have.
Okay, thank you. And hopefully, I'm hoping that these conversations can be weekly conversations, so that we continue to have that dialogue and any issues are addressed as quickly as they need to be, because obviously this is a very important topic. So the next question, I'm going to go to Councillor Shields, who had a question on data, I'm afraid. I think, yeah.
Don't be afraid. I'm looking at on my iPad at the responses from traffic officers that, in so many words, admit that the data you've collected in the end of August, during the school holiday, in unusual times, during COVID, they fall just short of saying the data you've collected isn't worth a carrot. It's absolutely rubbish-based data, because it's taken as an all-time strange time to take it. You're then going to extrapolate on air quality, whether the birds are singing, whether there's a day in the week. It's utter rubbish. It's built on sand. You have to, if you're going to have any credence, start your data collection from now to take note of the actual problems that residents and petitioners are making petitions about. Let's be honest, they're not petitioning because they like it. They're petitioning because they don't like it. And what I think the residents are seeing amongst, I dare say, the political and officer class is a conspiracy to produce data to make you right when clearly the residents think you are wrong. And the only fair way to do it is to collect the data afresh. And I really think we should. The data we've got is not worth a candle.
If I can come in before officers respond, I mean, one of the things that I remember discussing quite early on was when we were deciding the locations for the bids and so on, was I remember saying to officers, let's focus on areas where we either have consulted before and we have that information, and that's why a lot of the schemes are around Sutton. In North Sutton, we've had 2 consultations in the All Saints Road, Grinner area on the scheme. We had a consultation in your ward, Councillor Shields, in South Sutton with regards to the Liverpool neighbourhood bid, which is related to this topic. If you don't mind muting, Councillor Shields, I can hear myself speak. Thank you. And in terms of the data, I know that we have traffic counts for the North Cheam closure from 2017 and 2018. We have traffic counts and modelling for the North Sutton area from 2017, so all pre-COVID. We have traffic counts for the Worcester Park area for 15 sites in 2019 in those roads. And we also have traffic counts that were done pre-COVID in Butter Hill. So this idea that we absolutely don't have any relevant data, I think is frankly wrong. We do have data. The issue that we had is that because we only had 3-4 weeks to put the bids together, we obviously weren't in a position to collect all the data we would have gathered in normal circumstances. A project like this is normally carried over 12 to 18 months. And there's a lot of work behind it, but a lot of these projects we were already doing work on this, and we had consulted already, so it put us in a much stronger position, I believe, to put in stronger. Frankly, that's why we were in the top tier of boroughs that did receive bids, because TfL and the government, who had to sign off every single one of these bids, approved them. And actually, we were congratulated on the quality of our bids by TfL. It doesn't mean that we can't improve the data and that there's gaps that we need to fill, but it's also not accurate that we just put a finger in the air and said, let's just pick any area for random schemes without any evidence to back it up. So that, just wanted to make that point clear. I don't know if officers want to add anything else.
So why have repeated requests for the data not been met?
Only we're
back.
Councillor Shields, as you know, I always allow people to speak, so don't jump in.
You allow me to speak then?
Well, put it in the chat and I will come back to you. We're having an organised discussion. This is not a Donald Trump type of debate, please. So if you could mute.
It's not a Donald Trump debate.
If you could mute.
It's spontaneous, isn't it?
If you could mute, I'll come back to you. I have no problem with that. If officers want to respond.
So it's difficult to respond to the email that Councillor Shields is referring to, not having sight of it. But of course, if you want to share that, then I can look at that. But I would agree. We do need to improve the data that we're providing. Councillor Abelan is correct that there are counts from various times, pre-COVID and within COVID times, that we will use to compare the current data to. We are doing those current counts that you suggested, Councillor Shields, and they'll be taking place in October and November, and then we'll plan to do some more again in the new year after Christmas. So we are keen to be able to provide data and intelligence as a result of these schemes to see whether they are achieving what we're setting out to.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Ben Andrew and then to Councillor Stoneman.
Thanks very much, Manuel. It's actually more of a couple quick points in response to some of the stuff that was raised, just to clarify a few things. So, first of all, there was a couple mentions of like about like All Saints Road, and sort of I understand that people are saying, well, that's one of the petitions that didn't get as many signatures, so why has that one been removed and not other ones? I just wanted to be clear that decisions on these sort of things, it's taken on the petition wasn't necessarily the reason we said, okay, let's get rid of this. It was about looking at the situation on the ground and seeing, as lots of the Conservative councillors, other residents, everyone pointed out, there was a clear problem there. So it was a problem that we addressed, and that we're seeking to find solutions. I think in the North Sutton scheme especially, I think there's some real problems on the ground there. So I think that that was a necessary reason to pull it out. And on a more general point, I completely understand why residents are saying in some areas, like, okay, well, you've moved traffic away from this residential road onto that residential road. What's the point of that? Because of course we don't want to see that either. The problem is that it's not always easy to, it's actually quite hard, I understand, from highways officers to fully judge exactly where traffic reroutes. So sometimes you have to do a little bit, and this is a horrible sentence to say in this sort of context, but a little bit more trial and error and sort of see where the behavior moves to, especially with sat navs and apps these days. It can be hard to always judge. So it was those sorts of reasons why the All Saints one was taken out, because we could acknowledge, looking on the ground, there was a problem it was creating in terms of facilitating a second rat run. Just another quick point. I again really understand people making points about saying, well, you want the roads to be safer, but I saw, say you live near a closure and you're saying, oh, I'm seeing someone driving on the pavement, I'm seeing someone swearing and doing a U-turn, and I don't feel safe anymore. I think it was a poignant point by one of the gentlemen who was petitioning, saying, I used to feel safer than I do now, and obviously that's not what we want. The only thing I would say is that these sorts of things, like where someone pulls up to a closure, sort of goes, oh no, and U-turns around it and tries to find a way last minute to get around it, that's completely understandable in the start of a scheme, because people haven't had any chance to get used to it. So obviously when someone comes across a closure and they've never come across the closure before, that will cause a certain level of uncertainty on the roads. This is why I think you need a little bit of time. I think it's reasonable to expect a little bit of time to let things bed in. People have also mentioned the volatile circumstances with COVID, which might agitate this as well. But over a longer period, you can see, obviously, if in 6 months' time people are doing U-turns and driving on pavements, obviously something's gone very, very wrong. But some of these schemes we've heard petitioners talk about today, they're sort of 3 days old or a couple of weeks old. And I think it's important for us to sort of take the wider picture as a council. And just finally, not to take too much time, there's lots of questions. I want to talk about sort of the nature of the surveys and the petitions and what we take from them. So obviously we completely understand that in some cases there are literally thousands of people who have signed with big concern. Obviously as a council, you're concerned by that. And I think we have to take it as to mean that there is a significant group of people who have doubts, skepticisms, don't want this to happen about these schemes. They have significant doubts about it, quite a large group of people. And we've heard this in areas where these things have been introduced before. I don't think that takes away a mandate we have to try to pilot something to solve problems and see if it works, because, this is something which has been greenlighted by government, by TfL. It's worked in other areas, and it does sometimes, obviously, changes on roads do bring some agitation from some people at the start, and it's not a complete prerequisite that those things fail. I mean, I know that in Walthamstow, we've talked about Waltham Forest quite a lot as a good example, where they are very, very popular by all accounts. These schemes have been introduced, they've been very, very popular. But at the first time they were introduced, there was a parade of someone holding a gravestone of high streets in the area saying they're all going to die, and it didn't. So I'm not saying that the concerned residents have it necessarily wrong, or that there'll be, I just think it makes sense to look at what actually happens over the course of a trial, assess it, make changes, take things out, put things in, tweak things based on what we see, rather than just taking the immediate impulse of saying, okay, let's not do this pilot, let's give the money back, let's not try to solve these problems. Because problems like air quality, safety, rat running, whether you think these schemes are working or not, these are really, really important problems that I think councils have a duty to try to solve, and not to sort of back out at the first sign of there being problems or issues like that. Anyway, I've taken quite enough of your time, so I'll be quiet now.
Thank you very much, Councillor Andrew. I think that was more of an observation and comments rather than a question. So
it's a big old statement, yes, so move on.
No, that's fine. I'll move on to Councillor Stoneman.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I want to thank the petitioners that have brought forward the concerns of quite literally many tens of thousands of residents across the borough. I think it's disgusting the way that the chair and the vice chair have communicated their disregard for the petitioners so far, their lack of communication with the residents, their clear lack understanding of the effectiveness of the data that they have. I have a few points and questions in what I'm going to say here, so hopefully I can direct these at the appropriate you, the chair, or one of the officers. So just, you know, whoever wants to take these, please feel free to jump in at the end. So, Mr. Latham, earlier you said that the schemes are a 6-month trial. So how many signatures will be needed before early judgment is passed? And following on from that, Councillor Andrew, you're saying that because there were clear problems on the ground, that's why they removed restrictions, not necessarily because of the petition. So how long is it going to take for you and Councillor Abelan to actually listen to the residents that live on the ground, that live this every day, and also to the thousands of people that maybe are coming in from outside the borough to get to work? How long will it take for you to listen to those if you're not going to listen to literally thousands of signatures on a piece of paper that's telling you this isn't working on the ground? It's great to hear that you're interested in bragging about pleasing TfL. At what point are you going to actually please your residents? Because clearly you're more interested in pulling out the pieces of paper that you feel you've got from higher up. And residents are sick of having this sort of forced lack of consultation forced on them from powers up above. Normally yourself, Councillor Abelan, and Councillor Andrew, but also just the administration as a whole. We saw all of this with the parking strategy. We're seeing it again with these low traffic neighbourhoods. We've seen it with the bins. We've seen it with so much. Thousands of residents telling you something isn't working and you do nothing.
Thank you. I can take some of those questions. On the question of how many petitions, I did answer that question at SNR when Councillor Garrett raised it. I don't think that I don't think that it's about a specific number of petitions and each scheme is the same. I think you look at every scheme in its own merit, and I would point out to what Councillor Crowley said at SNR. He said, we are in the main in favor of all of this, but it cannot be a one-size-fits-all policy which takes into account all stakeholders. I think he's spot on there. We need to, as the trial progresses, look at the concerns, make adjustments. If they don't work, we pull them out, and look at each scheme in isolation. I don't think there's a specific amount of petitions that are needed. I think what I'm more interested in is the petition signal, as Councillor Andrew said, that there is anxiety, that there's skepticism, that there's for some people anger, and a lot of doubts, and that's why we heard from the petitioners today. And we need to establish a good dialogue. I was in Worcester Park for 4 hours on Tuesday, speaking to residents, and you know, despite all the noise that you hear on social media, the conversation was very, very positive. Many residents were at least understanding where we're coming from, even if they disagreed with us, and even if they were skeptical. Even some brought some potential ideas. There was a general acknowledgement that Browning Avenue has had a historical problem, and we'd like to fix it, but they're worried about the knock-on effect, and that's valid. And I would like to, rather than just a black and white, you pull everything out, and in 2 years we'll come back to the Worcester Park problem, which has been there for decades, of rat running and traffic and speeding and dangerous driving, and we'll start from square one. Let's use this trial as an opportunity to see if we can improve things, if we can, if some of this has works and can be kept, and if it doesn't, we will take it out and look at something different. It's also important. You talk about the consultation process and coming from above. The consultation process was decided by the government and by TfL. We didn't have any influence on how the measures, what the guidance and how we would consult. And you know, I can send you the letter from the DFT, which basically We don't want you to do a public consultation before any trials. We want you to use the trial as the consultation. And if the schemes are not implemented within 2 months, we will take the money back. And that is, and on top of all, they said, because there's been a few suggestions, can we introduce this measure or that measure? They said to us, you can introduce 3 types of measure, and this is the only funding that you get for the next 6 months. You can either do school streets, you can either do road closures, because their aim as the government policy, conservative government policy, is to trial pilots of low traffic neighborhoods. So they want to reduce volume of cars in residential roads. And interestingly, the Labour mayor and the Lib Dem council agree on that policy, that we should trial it, especially in areas that have been affected for a long time. So it was road closures, 20-mile-an-hour zones, if you have road closures, and school streets. We asked if we could do junction improvements. No. We asked if we could put chicanes and potentially speed humps. No. They said for the next 6 months and maybe longer, this is the only funding that you will get. The choice we had, was the process ideal? No. The choice, I don't like it, and I made those and Labour and Conservative colleagues from across London raise those concerns with the government and with the mayor. But we had a choice to make. Either we boycott the process and we don't engage and we don't get any funding, or we try to work around the process that was given to us, which is far from ideal. We try to use the trials as the consultation period, and we try to make a difference. We were elected to try things and to try to tackle the difficult issues. It would be too easy to do what, frankly, the opposition do, which is oppose everything, and not come up with any solutions. The opposition had a chance to feedback and suggest schemes. They didn't. They've had 3 months to make comments on possible amendments. They've said nothing. They said they supported the vast majority of schemes. That was Councillor Crawley at SNR. And then as soon as we voted the schemes in for a trial, they got cold feet week after week because you spotted a political opportunity. I'm afraid that's not serious. That's not trying to address serious matters. We're trying to address a very complex issue that won't be perfect because it's done under very tight deadlines. We'll need to make amendments, and we want to work with the community to make those amendments. We were keen to get the trials going so that we focus on, is this working as Councillor Andrew said, is it actually working, or is it not? Then we pull it or we amend it in discussion with the community, rather than you pull it before you trial it, and then probably not getting any funding for a while from TfL because they'll say, well, they're not up for this, and we'll have nothing to show for. I think it would be, that frankly would be a disservice to our residents. I think I gave they were asking me more than officers, so I'll move on to the next question or comment. So it was Councillor Stoneman, Councillor Andrew spoke. I'll go to Councillor Whitehead and then to Councillor Dwight.
Thank you, Chair. I'm one of the group of people that last year went to Waltham Forest to see the low traffic neighbourhoods in operation. And as the Chair has said, they were very popular there, but it did take some time to get them going. And they did have the benefit of time, which we haven't had here. The aim of it, of course, is to encourage behaviour change, for people to come out of their motor cars and people to drive more carefully in their motor cars. I'm concerned about a couple of recent changes. One, which has already been alluded to, is the impact of sat-navs, because there's no doubt that they're encouraging people to do rat running even more. So we try and encourage people not to go down a particular road, so the sat-nav then encourages them to go down another road rather than to look at their own behaviour. We also have the added problem that in COVID-19 there are more people that seem to have taken to their cars, particularly since the schools have gone back, because they're too frightened to use public transport. And what we need to do is to get people back onto public transport so that there's fewer cars on the road. So how can we actually encourage this behaviour change without people wanting to use sat-navs to go down further side roads and being frightened to use the buses, because we do need to get them back on public transport, whether it's buses or trains. And I've been on public transport recently, and it's a pleasure to go on them because they're actually so empty now and so clean. There isn't a problem with them. So we do need to encourage people to go back in public transport because this is one part of the solution.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. I'll go to Councillor Dwight, and then Councillor Zhukovska, and then Councillor Green.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. I hope I get as long as yourself and Councillor Andrew have had, because that was quite something. So I have spoken to lots of residents. I've heard a lot. I've listened as your now leader would like to do. And one of the things that has really, I'll be honest, I was gobsmacked by the admission around the emergency services, which is ridiculous. So they hadn't said that they shouldn't go ahead, but they had raised concerns, yet these proposals went ahead anyway. And also that you hadn't actually heard back from the emergency services over every scheme. So I'm sure that will concern local residents as much as it will concern me. Another thing that has really concerned me over this is the lack of communication, the lack of clarity, the lack of use of data. As Matt Clubb has alluded to, data needs to improve. We've been using historic data. It doesn't look like it's going to be improving because the school streets in my Stonecourt ward, I spoke to an officer there when that was being launched and said, are you going to be having a traffic count on the roads around this area to see what the impact might be? And he said no. So that's clearly not going to help in every single area of this borough. So that's very concerning. In relation to communication, the chair of this meeting, deputy leader of the council, clearly too afraid to put any statements on Facebook, which, as we know, is where residents have had to raise their objections to these schemes, actually put it on Twitter. Unfortunately for him, some residents are on Twitter, and then they shared them. And as I shared with Vicky, one of the petitioners earlier, there were two key things that I picked out of that. So one is that it might take 3 extra minutes to drive to your house. We think that that is good. Well, I don't think any residents will agree that it's only taking 3 minutes. And most of the schemes we're doing are nothing crazy. Well, again, I don't think that is where we're looking at the moment. And you also said, Councillor Abelan, that you had concerns over All Saints Road, however, went ahead with it anyway. I mean, who does that? I mean, we're looking at these things. There are clear dangers. I know Councillor Andrew said that these schemes, they need to bed in. Or what happens if a child is knocked over while these schemes are bedding in? I mean, do you think that's acceptable? Because I don't. I've seen the traffic around some of these schemes, and I know that the leader of this council clearly agrees, and that's why you rushed to remove it from All Saints Road. I had residents coming up to me in that area because, yes, we went and spoke to her residents because she wouldn't do it herself alongside her council colleagues, and one of them had had their car hit within the first couple of days of that scheme being introduced. So there are serious concerns, and I really object, actually, not surprised, but I object to the fact that Councillor Abelan, as always, brings this back to the government, because actually other councils have managed to consult properly. They have managed to put decent schemes in place that have resident support, majority resident support, and I think it's yet another example of failure of this council, of the Lib Dem administration of this council, the parking strategy, that we aren't getting that across the line here. Councillor Garrett, as you said, at SNR, made quite a few points that actually could have made this work. One of them was fewer schemes. So you've got all of these schemes, you applied for loads of schemes, you've got some of them approved. Instead of thinking, well, actually, we haven't got necessarily the resources, as officers have said, and that's not their issue, it's the administration's issue still with. Maybe you should have gone with less schemes and made those schemes consulted more widely, seen if they might be more successful. And one of the things Councillor Garrett put forward was the fewer schemes to do that. Completely ignored. Judging whether the scheme as a success has been covered today, clearly it's been made so clear by Lib Dem councillors today that these petitions are not the reason that this is up for debate. The petitions and the concerns of residents will not mean that these road closures are taken out, because actually you guys know better. That has been made clear tonight. Rebuilding public trust. I mean, what are you going to do? Later on, we have to sign off, or you'd like us to sign off, 2 further consultations. Well, if I was a resident, as I am, of this borough, why would I want to trust this council considering this debacle? And again, I come back to communication, because I know the leader of this council acknowledged it, and I know we've had apologies from officers over this. And frankly, I want to apologise to all of the residents watching the fact that it was so complicated just to find where this meeting was. I mean, some might surmise that, you know, the Lib Dems don't want you to be watching and seeing what they're doing in terms of how they're leading this council. So all in all, we don't not support making our streets, our roads safer. However, we need to work with the residents, the people that know this best. And the reason that government gave this project to local councils is because, in conjunction with working with local residents, they could put schemes in place that actually had support and would make our roads safer. And I think you've massively missed an opportunity, and you failed in your duty to the residents of this borough. And frankly, I think you should be ashamed. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor Dwight. Councillor Żukowska, Councillor Green, and then I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap it up because it'll almost be 2 hours of an item. I would love to carry on the debate, and I'm sure we'll continue to do so. But 2 last interventions, and then we will move on to the next item.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a few points and I guess observations, especially in response to the petitioners and some of the issues raised during the questions and the debate. Plus, I think it's important that residents know where different councillors stand on this issue. So I think it's good that we're having this debate and we're having that opportunity to discuss this. But I do think we need to do so in context and bearing in mind the reasons why we are doing this in the first place. Residents have been asking us for years, certainly since I was elected in 2014, and it has been confirmed in recent consultations that they want less traffic, less pollution and less speeding on residential roads. In addition, we recently made quite an ambitious pledge to tackle climate change, and we'll have the opportunity to discuss this a bit later on today, and reduce CO2 emissions. And even that, actually, at the time, I was personally quite clear that I didn't think that some of the targets were achievable or realistic, and some of the targets put by the I guess activists. It was agreed, and actually the opposition was very enthusiastic about this. So we now have a responsibility to deliver on this. And Councillor White had mentioned that COVID obviously also presented us with the urgent challenge, as residents were clearly not feeling comfortable and confident to take public transport, and we were facing a situation where a lot of those journeys could shift onto cars. And I think there are some estimates that on Central Road alone, something like over 450 journeys an hour could potentially move from buses onto roads. And I think we can all imagine what would happen if we added 400 additional cars an hour onto that road. So for me, I guess the starting point here was that not doing anything is simply not an option anymore, especially when you look at some of the future projections and the rate at which car ownership has been going up, and the level of traffic has been rising on our residential roads. So with the fact that London population is set to reach 10 million in the next 10 years or so, I think that we simply don't have the option not to act. So I don't think that we expect those measures to remove traffic, majority of traffic, but I think that without any measures, we will simply not have any space left on the roads. So this is not about banning cars. I think we all recognize that we need cars for a variety of reasons, but we need to have a grown-up conversations about how we use the car. And this scheme is essentially about reducing traffic in areas that were never designed to actually handle these volumes of traffic. It's really just about cars sharing the limited space that we have in a little bit more fair way with our local communities. So there is a growing body of evidence, and some of it was actually referred to during the debate, that actually similar schemes do boost life expectancy, they improve air quality without necessarily pushing traffic onto main roads. And I think on the flip side, it would be really interesting, I certainly would be really interested to know what the effect was in Wandsworth, where the LTNs were obviously reversed, and whether that had any positive effect on traffic there. So obviously quite difficult to predict exactly how some of the schemes will pan out, because, well, the schemes were designed with using as much of the evidence as we had available at the time. But ultimately, traffic is it's a force of human choice, right? So it's driven by people making thousands of decisions every second in response to the changing conditions. So it's really difficult, given that it's about human behavior. It's difficult to predict exactly how this is going to work. So this is why we are doing this as a trial, and these schemes are not set in stone. And I think it's because it was raised quite a lot, especially by the petitioners tonight, that the schemes are not working. But I actually believe it's way too early to tell whether the schemes are delivering the benefits that they were set to. I think it's to be expected that there will be a period of adjustment as drivers discover that they can't back run, and they either find alternative routes, or some of those routes might be actually completely outside the area, or they don't use cars. So it is clear that there is a considerable level of concern about some of those schemes, and this administration needs to take those concerns very seriously. But I think the last thing that any of us want is to cause any major disruption or displace traffic onto residential roads. And this is why we will look very carefully at the evidence and feedback received when the trials are up in 6 months. And I think there's also a few, I think a reoccurring theme in especially when it comes to the petitioners about displacing traffic either onto main roads or onto nearby residential roads. And I think, again, the evidence that we do have available shows that shift doesn't necessarily happen, and that, in fact, quite often what you see is the overall reduction in the number of motor vehicles on the roads rather than simply a move. But even if some of that traffic is displaced ultimately onto main roads, these are the roads that are designed to actually handle larger amounts of traffic. And the way they are designed, they are wider pavements, they've got normally more crossing points. So it's actually, they are designed to safely handle, or in a safer way, handle large volumes of traffic. And even that's obviously, while the majority of people, I think, in London and certainly in Sutton actually live on residential roads rather than by main roads, we do need to actually look at measures to, such as low emission zones and widening pavements to protect people who do live at main roads. And again, I think it's the same goes for displacing traffic onto nearby residential roads. If we look at the evidence, actually, what happens quite often is the opposite. That traffic just disappears from the area because it's either moved onto the main road or people choose not to make those journeys. So I think what I'm trying to say is that unless we try this, we just won't know exactly how they are working. But we will be looking at the evidence. We will be making a decision, and I think it was made very clear by the officers and by the chair that if the schemes are not delivering on the benefits that they were designed to, we will either change them or remove them. I think this is very clear. This is why the funding was only provided for us on a 6-month basis, and these schemes are trial, not permanent. So I guess just to sum up, because I don't want to take any more time, I would just say that on a slightly different note, I think there's been examples of some pretty appalling behavior, I think, on either side of this debate, especially on social media. And I personally wouldn't want this to become another culture war or to split our community. I would just say let's try this. Let's gather as much data as evidence as we can and feedback. And after 6 months, let's make decisions based on the information that we have. And I guess throughout the time, let's try to stay open-minded and have a grown-up, respectful conversation about it.
Thank you. I'm going to give the last word to Councillor Green. I know this is an important topic, and I will be more than happy to have another discussion on this at the next ENN meeting. No problem with that. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Councillor Abelan. My husband will agree. I always get the last word, so here goes. Firstly, I would actually like to agree with Councillor Sikowska. We do need to have adult conversations, and we do need to be respectful. I'd like to remind everybody that we as councillors and officers should be about our residents. What we do should be about our residents. It shouldn't be about politics, but people. Same old thing, I know. And I'd like to remind everyone that today is Old People's Day. So we need to bear them in mind when we look at these schemes, which will potentially isolate some of them, especially those in Butter Hill, but I think there are others. Councillor Andrews says that these schemes need time to bed in. Well, yeah, they probably do. But I personally believe 6 months is far too long, because it only takes a very short time to lose a business and a job. And I have a lady coming from Sutton into our ward to work, and she is struggling. She has 2 children who go to school in Merton. They go to different schools. She has to now get up earlier to drop them off and to get into work. But because of the traffic, she's getting extremely stressed, and it is not helping her mental health. So if we, think about our old people as well, them being isolated, can't get to the shops or whatever. However, moving on, I'd like to go to school streets, please. And your volunteers. I think I saw Councillor Batman in a yellow crossing thing. Was there a risk assessment done about them volunteering to march barriers across the road? Because there should have been. And I'd like to know, have they had the appropriate road traffic safety training? Because actually, it's not that simple. You don't just walk out and stick your pole in the air. You have to be trained. So if they haven't had it, I'd like to know, if they haven't, why not? And Matt, it doesn't need data to know that routing traffic onto main roads will increase air pollution. I have a really big problem with the word data. I work for researchers, and they can make data say anything they wanted to. So as far as residents of Sutton are concerned, beware those bearing data gifts is all I can say. And you say, oh, we couldn't hold a consultation because it was all so quick. Forgive me if I'm barking up the wrong tree here, and I could be. It's been a long night. Were we not talking about low traffic neighbourhoods and safer streets a year or so ago? Have they not sort of been in the pipeline? So could we not have had some form of consultation through the local committees, so that at least if something occurred or you suddenly came into money, Councillor Abelan won the millions in the lottery and decided to help the borough out, could we not have done something through local committees to have that sitting there, so that we had some idea of how residents would feel? Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you very much. And can we have a break now, please?
Yes, please. I think the point you made about school streets, I'd like officers to pick that up, and if they could respond to that one, that would be great.
Shall I go first? Sorry, Councillor Abelan, Matt and I both come on. I'll say something initially, and Matt will add to what I say. I think the principles around the School Streets programme are based on experience in other places where volunteers have been part and parcel of ensuring that these schemes reflect the input from local parents and community members. I don't have the answer to Councillor Green's specific question about any specific training provided. I'm passing that question to Matt to see if he's aware of that. I think we can pick that point up. Of course, we need to make sure that volunteers are equipped to act briefly, not just with livery, but with the moving of barriers, which Councillor Green highlighted.
Thank you.
So just to pick up on,
yeah, sorry, go on.
Just to pick up on that point, all the staff and volunteers have been fully briefed by members of the team as to what their role is and what they should and shouldn't do. And that is, their role is purely to act as advisory, to explain the benefits of the scheme, and encourage drivers not to drive during those times when potentially children are walking in the road using the schemes. So as Simon said, there's a mixture of volunteers come from a mixture of places.
I'm not happy with that. There should be a risk assessment and they should have proper road safety training. So I would like it put on note that if anything happens to one of these volunteers, they have really not had a risk assessment, nor have they had proper road safety training from the proper authorities. Thank you.
Councillor Green, I'll be, Councillor Andrew is leading on that project. We'll be more than happy to, we get along quite well. We can discuss this outside this meeting and I'll be happy to see what we can do.
It's really important, Chair. It is extremely important. We're talking about children being seen across roads by volunteers, and if there is no risk assessment and no proper road safety training, the council will be culpable.
I think you've made your points well, and I'll be more than happy to continue the discussion with you and see how we can improve this.
Can I go and get a cup of tea now, please?
I think there's a point of order. He looks very puzzled, but come in, Councillor Shields.
Well, I think we've done the dance for some while now, Councillor Aberlan. You are no doubt moving to the position of you want councillors to note this position. I do not note this position. I have a counter proposal or motion, which I have a seconder in Councillor Jed Dwight. That is to revoke all local traffic neighbourhood schemes as per petition, as per requests of residents. It is time we had some democracy in this borough. We've had a lot of waffle, but the residents are up in arms. They do not want your local traffic schemes because they are causing chaos and mayhem. And I think we need to vote on it.
And Councillor Dwight is your seconder?
Yes, yeah, happy to second, thank you.
Okay. Cassie or Matt Stickley, do you want to take us through the procedure of how we're going to vote on the amended recommendation, and then sorry, there was a beep there. Amended recommendation and first, and I suppose then if there's another vote. My personal view is that I think it would be too early to. We've made our points. I'm not going to rehearse them. I think there is merit in doing carrying with the trials. The word trial is important. The challenge for us is to engage with residents to be able to amend schemes where they have to be amended, revoke them before the 6 months if they are causing a clear negative impact, and there's nothing else we can do to make improvements. So I would not support the recommendation, and I hope our group won't. I think there is merit. We have the trials. Let's let them bed in. Let's have a mature conversation with residents, and then we can take the appropriate decisions. But I'll let the officers guide us through the voting process. I'm not a very procedural person.
Hi, sorry about that, Chair. So obviously we've had an amended recommendation from Councillor Shields to revoke all local traffic neighbourhood schemes. So for that, we'll have to vote on the amendment first, and then whether that passes or fails, then we vote the recommendations as a whole. So we don't have to do this as a roll call. It's at your discretion, Chair. So we can either do it through the comment box or we can do a roll call.
If members want to indicate in the chat whether they are in favour of Councillor Shields and Councillor Dwight's recommendation, I'll give you sort of 10 seconds to do it, and then Cassie can sort of count the results.
Councillor Abelan, I think we should say who we are and say how we vote on this, please, so residents can see clearly. They're watching, so.
I mean, I think it's just quicker to put it. Councillor Dwight.
With respect, that was one of the options that Cassie has obviously given us.
And it's to my discretion. I think we've been at this for 2 hours. If you could put your vote in the chat, Cassie will sum up the results of the vote, and then we move on to potentially another vote, or if it's agreed. So if you could, in the next 10 seconds, put it in the chat, I would appreciate that.
Chair, I must object. You have not even heard the wording of what you are voting on. This is outrageous.
You've just said the vote is to revoke the schemes.
And is it not normal to have the accurate wording recorded by the clerk?
If Cassie wants to record the, if you want to state what once again what we are voting on, I think it's pretty clear. But if this is a classic Councillor Shields' show, but go on. If you want to, Cassie, repeat the amended recommendation, we will vote on it.
Could I ask Councillor Shields says the wording, please?
Yes. Well, is to listen to petitioners and revoke low traffic schemes in line with residents' expectations that democracy still lives in Sutton.
If members want to vote in the chat.
How do the residents know how you voted then?
Cassie will outline the results. She's doing it right now.
Okay.
I believe that's everyone's vote is in.
Yeah, so I make that 3 in favour of Councillor Shields' amendment and 7 against.
Thank you. So the amendment, I understand, is not carried.
Chair, that is
Yeah.
wrong because I voted in favour of Councillor Shields' amendment. So it's 4, not 3. Sorry for the interruption.
No problem, Councillor Green. I apologise. So 410.
Chair, can I make a
Can
point?
we have the political split of that, please? Because this is a recording. The public do not know what is going on.
Can I make a point of order, please, Chair?
Go on.
Thank you. Well, in line of, I know it's a genuine mistake that there was a miscount there. I would like this to be made a recorded vote so it can be seen exactly who has voted on what side of the amendment.
I don't have a, it's been 2 hours and 10 minutes. We have 3 other agenda items. This is just delaying things for no reason. Everyone's voted for the 4 opposition members in favour of the recommendation, and the 6 administration members against. Couldn't be clearer. So I think we can move on to the recommendations as originally stated in the report. The first recommendation is are to note the petitions, and then at 1.2, 1.2.1 to 1.2.5 are also to note. The only one that we have to vote on is to agree that an update of the schemes is brought to the next meeting of the ENN committee. I hope that everyone can agree to that, but if you can indicate in the chat whether you are in favor of another update on this and discussion in the chat, I would be grateful. And I think Mr. Stickley wanted to come in.
Sorry, Chair. I think the moment may have passed on that one. It was just to clarify things on the last vote, but we've now got a vote on the unamended recommendations. So that's fine.
That's fine. And I know it took quite a long time, but I think it's an important topic. I know there's a lot of people listening, and we've been at it for over 2 hours, which I think is a record at an ENN meeting. So what I'll do is we can move on to, let's do the next petition, and then we can have a short sort of 5-minute break, and so that we can then tackle the last 2 items, which are quite important as well. So if we can take just I think is Mr. Vesti to join the meeting to have his 5 minutes on his petition. We'll allow him, we'll just adjourn for a second and then carry on.
Thank you, Chair. Seeing as we we need to adjourn.
And debate the issue, though, I'm sure.
Of course.
Thanks.
So Councillor Whitehead is here, Councillor Cook is here, Councillor Andrews here, Gillian. I think we're. I quickly saw Tony on the camera. There he is. Okay, so let's crack on. So this is a petition regarding street cleaning and refuse collection in Hagbridge. Mr. Sheldon Vesey, the petitioner, is with us. So Mr. Vesey, over to you for 5 minutes.
Lovely. Okay. Well, thank you very much for introducing that, Manuel. I think all the Lib Dems can breathe easy. It's not going to be quite as difficult as the LTNs. First off, so the petition that I brought was to do with rubbish that was plaguing Hackbridge, in effect. So Hackbridge has had, or is about to receive, almost 1,000 new properties. And with that, there seems to be a large influx of rubbish. I'm happy to report, though, that today me and another local resident met with Andrew Chandler. We discussed many of the problems that we've seen. We suggested a series of things that was more bins, larger bins, and smart bins. And I'm pleased to report that we've come back with a possible resolution on that, which is the inclusion of smart bins. Andrew was also able to tell me that there's been some communication issues, and that was from our local councillors to people who were reporting things to them and instead not to the council. But I think fortunately we'll be able to tidy that up. There were a few things that we weren't quite in agreement with, but they are set to be reviewed. Now, that is where flats above shops are putting their refuse, but we hope that with the inclusion of these smart bins, that we can stem many of the issues that we've had with litter and rubbish in Hackbridge. I think that sums everything up from my end. Thank you.
That's quite impressive, Mr. Vesey. A minute and a half. That's well done. So I don't know if there's any questions from committee members. If you could, I'll go to Councillor Dwight first. He's just indicated, but if any others want to ask questions, please indicate in the chat.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Sheldon, for putting the petition in. This is, it probably won't surprise you, actually. Street cleansing and refuse collection is an issue that's raised in my Stonecourt ward as well as across the borough. And one thing I will say is that I think councillors on all sides have been working to improve things because they were in a pretty dire state only a few years ago. And, you know, I thank officers etc. for their work, and we'll come on to that a second. But I just wanted to ask, do you think that it is appropriate that residents have to launch a petition over something as basic as street cleansing and rubbish refuse collection? And also, in your area, have you recently seen the street cleaning guys out and about kind of keeping your area tidy? Thanks.
Okay, so thank you very much for your questions, Jed. I think to put it simply, no, I don't think that it's appropriate. To add a bit of context, so I didn't put this petition together on my own. I put it together with several other people, many of which who have lived in Hackbridge for much longer than I have. One chap's actually collated 18 months of pictures of issues with the bins. And he tells me that he's reported it to our councillors numerous times. I've seen evidence of that on Facebook. For whatever reason, that hadn't led to much. Unfortunately, I'm not privy to why, but there we go. And the second thing was that I was told by Andrew Chandler was that there is a correct route in which to go about this, but for some reason, the councillors weren't informing residents of how they should do this, which in turn was stunting how Veolia could actually respond to what the residents were saying. I mean, this led into a much larger discussion with Andrew, who, you know, to his credit, is very smart, very knowledgeable chap. He managed to talk it through with me and another resident and asked for more resident input on these things. And for us, that actually looked to be the way forward because of those issues. The reason that I got involved myself is my daughter's almost 2. And when I walk through Hackbridge, she tries to pick up rubbish and litter. Some of that is food waste. Some of it is chicken bones. You know, and it's just not appropriate. I know that we have Hackbridge Primary School right next to us, and it's a similar thing. I think I've probably rehashed many of your points there. But yeah, in closing, no, unfortunately, it wasn't appropriate. But we have found a route that I think is resident-led. You know, I'm fortunate enough to chair my residents association. Dave Chill, who came with me to meet Andrew Chandler, chairs his. We've spoken to the Hackbridge Neighbourhood Development Group, and there is a nice core community of people that are actively involved in that. And I'm loath to bring it back to the LTNs ever so briefly, but sometimes local people do know better. And I think that if we can get those people to work together and put it back to the council officers, we'll probably get a resolution that's much better. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks.
Thanks. Thank you. Any other questions from councillors? I haven't seen anything in the chat. No. Okay. Mr. Vesti, thank you very much for your time. I'm just gonna give you a few moments to leave the virtual room and follow the rest of the discussion from the YouTube channel, the council stream, if that's okay. Thank you very much for your time and for your presentation. Okay. I mean, this seemed to me very much to be an operational sort of petition raising operational matters, and I'm glad that the residents are already engaging with officers to try and resolve them. That's what we should be doing. I was going to make a few comments, but I would rather go straight to one of the ward councillors, Councillor Żuchowska, if you want to say something.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, I guess, respond to a few points raised by Mr. Vesti, and just make a few general points. So we know the petition. First of all, thank you for bringing it to this committee. What I would say to residents, and I think Councillor Dwight made that point, litter and fly tipping are probably in the top 5 issues that we deal with as far as council is concerned. We really used to dealing with that. And obviously we want to, as local councillors and as residents in the borough, we want to make sure that our area is pleasant, is free of litter and fly tipping. But first of all, just to respond to a point made by Mr. Vesti, I assure you that we do raise the issue with officers every time we received any reports of an area experiencing a dip in the level of street cleanliness, or in fact any report of fly tipping. We also have been clear to residents that the best and the preferred route is to use the report system, the council website. Unfortunately or fortunately, some residents are very used to reaching out to us directly and emailing us, and obviously they do, and they raise concerns. We then raise it directly with the officers and with the council, rather than sending them around the block and asking them to report it on the council website. I'm also really glad that Mr. Vesti thinks that the smart bins are a good idea. We obviously, this was decided quite a while ago. We campaigned for that. We wanted to make sure that Hackbridge was one of the areas that were the early adopters of the bins, because we know that this is something that has worked in other parts of the borough. So I also welcome that this is confirmed. And I think just to go to Hackbridge specifically, we have previously identified or dealt with I guess spikes in the level of rubbish in Hackbridge, and I think previously we identified a Saxon house collection system as a possible cause of the amount of litter between Sainsbury's and the station. And I know that this has been raised directly with the Saxon house collection team, and obviously we'll continue to keep an eye on that. We also know that the area is swept and monitored, and I actually would welcome perhaps if the officers could give us a little bit more detail on how the area is being looked after, specifically in Hackbridge. But just as I guess going forward, we will continue to monitor this, but in the past 12 months, I think we've had 12 reports of overflowing bins or reported, of which 6 were made by officers, and then we had about, I think, 11 reports of street cleansing issues, and 9 of these were actually made by residents. So all this to say is that we obviously will continue to raise this on behalf of the residents if we know there are an issue. But going forward, what we really need is to establish if there is any pattern here, or if there is really an underlying cause of any spikes in the amount of rubbish in the local area. So the best way to do it is data, and obviously the number of reports that are being made on the council website. So all that is to say that, you know, I would just encourage residents to continue to raise this, and as Mr. Vesti made that point, preferably with the report, through the report system, because that way it goes directly into the system and it feeds, and it allows us to pick up on any red flags and action it promptly.
Matt Clove, if you want to come in to respond to some of that, or is that okay?
Andrew can come in and respond to that, if that's okay, Chair.
Oh, sorry, I hadn't seen Andrew yet. Sorry, Andrew. Welcome to the. Thanks for your patience, and welcome to the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Andrew Chandler, head of waste and street cleansing. So as Mr. Vesti said, we met this morning and had very productive conversation about the services and about some of the work and the campaigning materials and what we're doing around litter bins and the smarter bins he talked about in the Hackbridge area. So I suppose just in response to what is happening in the area, we have addressed some of the issues that Mr. Vesti has brought up around kind of the use of the litter bins and kind of how they're being. Some of them are filling very quickly, and just how the council responds to that. So we went through the reporting and how we are actively going to be promoting wider campaigning this month about the using Report It, so that we can gather that data and look at and gather some intelligence about are there times where we need to be redirecting services? Are there times where there's spikes? Because certainly, as was mentioned, you know, the kind of the reporting data we have doesn't necessarily highlight the scale of the concerns. I think just to clarify the point that Mr. Vesti made about information coming through to us, we did talk about a number of member inquiries that my team has dealt with, and just echoed some of the concerns that he's raised and the responses that we've given on those. So there was discussion about that, but I think what we've agreed to move forward is to continue looking at this with him, to kind of to consult on some of the proposals we've got around the changes to litter bins in the area, and to keep him informed on the campaigning work.
Thank you, Mr. Chandler. Anyone else that wants to? Can't see Councillor Dwight. And after this intervention, I mean, the points I was going to cover were covered just now by Councillor Żuchowska, so I'll give you the last word, Councillor Dwight, and then we'll move on.
Lovely, thanks, Chair. So as I said to Sheldon, obviously these issues have been kind of run through many times over the past few years, and I absolutely agree that and officers often tell me this as well, trying to get residents over to the Report It thing is really important, and often I will they get in touch with me as their local councillor to let me know about rubbish collections, etc., and then I will forward it on to officers, but always just get in touch with them afterwards to say that Report It is a really good way of trying to keep a record of when these things aren't going so well. I know I don't know if Matt or Andrew would be best to answer this one, because I know, Matt, that when we were in a meeting, it was discussed about using technology and things like that, particularly in relation to collecting rubbish that's been collected by others, and making sure it's not left for a week or so afterwards and then is strewn across the street. And another issue I know I've raised with you, which is a borough-wide issue again, is in relation to on bin day, litter actually being left after the bin lorry, if you like. So I know I've followed a bin lorry on a few occasions, and there's just been litter all over the street. So I was just kind of looking at where we are on both of those points.
Thank you. Andrew, do you want to come
in? Yes, of course. I'm sorry, I wasn't privy to the details of the conversation about the technology. Certainly, the technology that we're talking about with smarter bins are sensor bins. So these are some of the bins that we've been trialling in Sutton High Street, compactor bins, which are able to trigger alerts to crews, so that as that bin fills up, and it means that it will be attended to immediately, rather than waiting until the scheduled round that would normally happen. So that's what we're talking about with the sort of phased rollout and trialing that in other areas, which included Hatbridge. So I hope that sort of addresses a point, and sort of that links a little bit to some of the smarter technology stuff around what's happening with, certainly with Report It, and trying to encouraging that reporting, and we're obviously linking that to changes that are happening on the digital platform. So making the reporting easier for residents. And just, I suppose, just to emphasise that all of this is about, we recognise as we've said with Mr. Vesti, that we need to engage with residents, and we'll engage with ward councillors. So this isn't about us just solely relying on the data we got, because we recognise the data doesn't paint the full picture. So we need to we'll engage with ward councillors, and we will engage with any residents groups that are keen to about sort of changes and suggestions that we're putting forward.
Thank you. I think there's a point of order, Councillor Whitehead.
Yes, bearing in mind we have a really heavy agenda and two very big policies coming forward, which form the basis of this agenda, and we haven't even got onto them yet. I would like to move next business so that we can actually discuss our sustainable transport strategy and our climate change policy.
That's that's fine. I would like to be able to tackle the sustainable transport paper by 10, and then start the climate change one. So that we can at least give it a bit of time for discussion. So if we can move on to the recommendations of this petition, which is to simply note the petition and note the clarification of the street cleaning policies in as per the report. And I'm sure that ward councils and officers will continue to be in touch with residents in that area. If you could either indicate in the chat that you're happy to note, we will move on. That's fine. Great, thank you. So Mr. Weber and the team are here. Can I apologize for waiting, for keeping you waiting so patiently? But over to you for the presentation of the report.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief in view of the time. The report seeks to agree the draft Sustainable Transport Strategy 2020 to 2025 consultation. This updates the existing Sustainable Transport Strategy. There's been a number of changes to policy. It brings together under one document all the council's walking, cycling and car club strategies. It brings the document up to date with planning policy in particular, as well as the Mayor's Transport Strategy. The Mayor's Transport Strategy has a London-wide target of 80% of all journeys undertaken by car by 2041, and the 2019 LIP 3 explains how Sutton proposes to contribute to that target. The targets are all set out in Appendix B of the strategy. This is going to be a living document subject to changes to strategies as part of the annual LIP bidding or its equivalent, given the uncertainty over funding since COVID-19. The new targets supersede the targets in the existing strategy, and those targets form part of LIP 3 and the Council's Environment Strategy, Climate Emergency Response, which all underpins the promotion of walking, cycling and use of public transport while enhancing our streets and public places. There'll be a separate delivery plan presented to this committee alongside the final post-consultation version of this strategy. The strategy is set out in the report. It takes into account the impact of COVID-19, concerns about travel to work, crowding in public places and on public transport. It includes the creation of low traffic neighbourhoods to encourage healthier and safer communities by promoting walking and cycling in places where children can play safely. It'll improve air quality and promote inclusive public transport for people with disabilities and enhanced age, as well as dementia-friendly travel options. It'll benefit our residents, businesses, and those invested in the built environment in Sutton. Importantly, and speaking as head of planning at Sutton, this document will be setting out our expectations for developers in their role as contributors towards providing sustainable transport benefits for our residents. And more detail of those benefits is set out in paragraph 4.1 of the report. Chair, the significance of it becoming a supplementary planning document is that this will give us a much more weight in our negotiations with developers, and it will stand us in a stronger position in our decision making, and also in the event of appeals to the Secretary of State. Chair, in view of the time, that was all I was meaning to say. Myself and colleagues are happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Webber. And again, I apologize. This paper would have warranted a full hour discussion in normal times. I think the report is excellent. It was actually it's a long report, but very pleasant and easy to read. I think officers did a fantastic job in pulling all those policies together, and it gives us a really good, strong document that sets out the vision and the specific policies that we want to consult residents on. I'm going to go to Councillor Whitehead first, who is our lead member on the administration side on transport issues, and then I'm going to go to Councillor McCoy, who has been patiently waiting. As Mr. Webber said, this is will carry a sort of extra planning weight, and I'd love to hear a few words from her as Chair of HED. Over to you, Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you. When I was chair of Environment and Neighbourhood myself, I led on the development of the last Sustainable Transport Strategy, which covered the years 2015 to 20. And I think it's safe to say it was one of the landmark strategies of the last administration. And I've continued to promote this strategy through being the past and current chair of the Public Transport Liaison Group. The STS brought together a number of different strategies, both at borough and pan-London mayoral level, dealing with the issues of the time when there was and still is an increasing growth in road transport to the detriment of our residents. And this is still an issue to be vigorously tackled. The council has a history of promoting environmentally friendly modes of transport, promoting active travel to enhance air quality and improve public health, and supporting modern technology to bring forward more sustainable methods of travel, such as electric vehicles. And there are new schemes coming forward which involve hydrogen and so on. So it will be an exciting few years. Some of our key asks over the years have evolved from our original smarter travel policies of the mid-2000s, which were intended to bring about behaviour change. And I've already spoken about that tonight. As a climate change borough, that behaviour change is even more important now than it ever was in the past. But what have we done to date? We succeeded in ensuring the Thameslink train continued to cross London when there was a threat to stop it at Blackfriars. We succeeded in improving the radial bus route X26 to Sutton, making it half hourly rather than hourly, and now we're pressing for it to be every 15 minutes. More recently, we trialled the successful Go Sutton on-demand bus, and we continue to campaign for Tramlink, the overground, and train metroisation to come to Sutton, as these are absolutely essential for the development of our post-COVID economy. Through the Public Transport Liaison Group, we've succeeded in getting improved bus services in terms of frequency and reliability. And even more bus services we've been promised will be brought to Outer London. In fact, the results of the Sutton Bus Review will be revealed within the next month, with yet more improvements likely despite reduced resources for TfL. I do urge everyone to take part in the TfL consultation, which will be from mid-October to the end of November, and we will be discussing this at the PTLG taking place, I think it's on the 21st of October. And also we have a highly developed system of travel to school plans. So we've talked a lot about travel to school with our school streets projects. And we've probably got more school plans than elsewhere in London. If we encourage teenage children to travel to school on foot, bike or public transport, we would free up a lot of congested road space. We do hope to capitalise on the reduced vehicle use and cleaner air experienced during COVID-19, but it does seem to be increasing again with fear of use of public transport. Again, we've discussed this tonight, but we need to do all we can to ensure there's not an increase in pollution from the motor car through encouraging people to go back to public transport. Do think about it, it's worthwhile. The stats are challenging. In the UK, the average number of vehicles on our roads increased by over 500,000 per year between 2012 and 2019. During that time, our population increased and there was a growth in multiple car owning homes, which has put pressure on our very limited road space. As we know, Sutton has the 4th highest car ownership and usage in London, and clearly this is not sustainable in the longer term. A real modal shift is needed. It's for this reason I'm glad that the new STS will act as supplementary planning guidance, allowing us to build in sustainable transport into major development schemes. So developers will no longer be able to hide by let's have cars here and cars there. We actually need to improve that level of PTAL, which has already been discussed about tonight. I'm sure the new STS will bring yet more resources to Sutton over the next few years to help us develop sustainable transport in Sutton still further. This will not only help improve residents' lives, but it will also benefit our new post-COVID economy. And that's going to be really important in the future, which is going to be based more on local economies like Sutton. And also it will help develop our climate change policies, which we're going to hear more about later on in the evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead, and thank you for your leadership on this matter. I know it's something close to your heart, and you've chaired for many years now the Public Transport Liaison Group very well, and bring so much knowledge to those meetings. I'm going to hand over to Councillor McCoy if she wants to say a few words, and then Councillor Żuchowska and Councillor Cook have indicated.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me tonight. The reason I'm pleased to be here is because I think this paper is an excellent demonstration of cross-committee working. The issue is bigger than just transport issue. It is borough-wide, and it underpins a lot of other aspirations for the borough. But most of all, the vision in the sustainable transport policy is a vision with lots of aspirations. But what I like about this is by making it into a supplementary planning document, it makes it deliverable and enforceable. So it fits very, very well with our local plan aspirations, and this explains further and gives more detail about what we require from developers. And I just reference as well Councillor Whitehead, who, when we were delivering the local plan, developing it, the local plan, as part of the cross-party working, Councillor Whitehead sat on the local plan task and finish group, so that I think we can thank her for a lot of the transport and sustainability items that were as part of the basic local plan, and for keeping us on our toes there. So this is important as well because it helps us helps us deliver our aspirations, because we are asking the developers who, with the development they bring, also brings pressures onto our borough. We're asking them to help fund and implement the measures that we need to take to make the area better, more sustainable. But it also fits in very, very nicely with the local plan aspirations around placemaking. And there's a lot of sustainable aspirations in the local plan anyway, and some supplementary documents. So it's making developers take responsibility, but I think this really strengthens the policy, and this is the first time I believe we've done it this way, and I very much welcome it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCoy. And I think it's interesting that we often think of transport as just the benefits of transport as just moving people from A to B, but actually, as you often point out, it's such an important aspect when it comes to regeneration, to growth, and, as you said, placemaking. I wondered, before I go to Councillor Żuchowska, if you had a few words, just your views on, obviously there's COVID means there's a lot less people going into central London now, less commuting. Do you think that this gives us an opportunity to maybe, now that people are spending more time in Sutton, revitalize our district centres in Sutton, and whether improving access to them by more sustainable transport and so on would help?
Well, we've always said that people that walk, cycle or use public transport to our district centres and town centres tend to spend more per trip. So it's really important for the local economy, and all those principles have been enshrined in our sort of planning documents up until now. It really does help support the local economy. People see planning as an individual site, decisions on individual sites, individual applications, but actually, as I've learned over the years, planning underpins so much of what we want to do as a council. So sustainable travel helps underpin the local economy. And I think with the changes that we've seen through COVID, there's talk about 15-minute streets and 15-minute high streets and 20-minute neighbourhoods. I'm not sure. I think they're the same thing, but it's the idea that people are using the local area more, but we've got to make it attractive to go to those places. I've seen schemes implemented over time, including in Wallington, where specifically the aim to change a district centre to make it easier to walk, cycle and get around, and that's been very successful, and we've seen quite a big return of both businesses and shoppers to Wallington, and I'd definitely like to see that elsewhere. So I think this will help contribute towards that, and I think it's moving with the times very much. We need to capitalise on this changing, the way people are changing and using their district centres and travelling to those centres during the pandemic, because I think there's going to be some seismic changes about the way people do it, with more working from home. So we've got to be ready to meet those changes and to make sure that they work for our local area.
Thank you very much. I'm conscious of time. We need to wrap this up in the next 9 minutes. So I'm going to go to Councillor Żuchowska, and then Councillor Shields has a point, and then we'll move on to the recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it really brief and cut any waffle, just to say that I do really welcome the fact that this will strengthen our hand at planning stage, because obviously where houses have a relationship to businesses and to where people live will make a difference in terms of how many people use sustainable modes of transport. So I think it's quite important that that transport is central consideration from the early stages of any planning or regeneration. But my question is actually very specific, and it's to the officers. Obviously, a lot of this, as always is the case, depends on funding. So how, given that there is currently an ongoing dispute or bailout negotiations between the government and TfL, how dependent is the delivery of this strategy on the outcome of that negotiation?
Thank you, Councillor Żuchowska. Mr. Webber?
Shall I come in on this one, Chair? Because it's specifically about TfL. Andy, unless you had an answer prepared, which you may well have an answer.
No, I was actually going to defer to Phil, but my short answer was going to be yes. There's a great dependency in terms of funding, and a point I've made to, I think, Councillor Abelan previously about this strategy is, at a time when we have the government white paper out on planning reforms, we potentially got significantly greater housing targets, and I think the notion that we have greater sustainable travel choices and further investment in public transport infrastructure in the borough will give us a chance of being able to meet some of those targets. But Simon or Phil, I'd invite you to comment as well.
Well, all I would say, and Phil might want to add to it, Chair, mindful of time, is there is so much uncertainty about TfL's negotiations with the government that I think Andy's absolutely right. We are, of course, reliant on that funding source or funding directly from the Department for Transport, but there is really no clarity as of this evening about where those negotiations will will take us in readiness for the new financial year. But as this document displays, I trust both to this committee and to our residents when we consult more widely, we are ready to lobby for Sutton and its residents, whatever funding opportunities arise. So I don't know if Phil is still here, if he wants to say anything further on this.
Thank you, Simon. I think that's important. I think it also reinforces the need to ensure that developers, particularly large developers in the borough, play their part. But the shape of the document also gives us an opportunity to shape up our thinking on how we might deliver things so that when funding does become available, we don't quite have spades in the ground, but we know the approach we're going to take and we know where we need to tackle things.
Thank you very much. I'm going to, conscious of time, we have to start the next item before 10, so I'm going to go to Councillor Shields, and I'm afraid we're going to need to move on to the next item. Councillor Shields.
Well, firstly, we have huge gravity in what we're talking about here. I think rushing it through is a mistake. That said, you're chairing it, that's that. My concern is, how will the consultation work? What will the questions be? How will they be interpreted? What is the devil in the detail? I mean, let's face it, you were basing a lot of the last couple of items on asking people if they didn't like cars driving up their road or parking up their road. So you're ripping them off for parking in their road and you're building a brick wall at the end of their road. That is not the outcome that they expected when they said quite innocently and meekly, oh, there are a few cars in my road. So I want to know how the consultation will be handled, who will be handling it, what will be the questions, because I heard Jane McCoy, and thank you, Jane, for attending. She seems to know what's going to happen in the future post-COVID. I suggest she gets on to number 10 Downing Street immediately. We are talking about facts that do not exist. So, Simon Latham has no clarity whatsoever. You cannot consult on the unknown. We need to stand back. We need to give this 6 months and perhaps approach this again. Implications, on item 6, page 29, 5.1. Option 1, allow existing action plan, which must be robust and good because it's a Lib Dem action plan, so it can't be sort of a throwaway one, can it? Can't be a sort of change horse midstream job. Allow it to carry on, and we could wait for 6 months. We are trying to make cast in stone decisions through consultation that I do not trust to get the outcomes that you yourself want, councillor, because you know what's going to happen post-COVID. I don't, you don't, nobody does, and you're making policies that will self-handcuff this authority for years to come. This is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. Wait, stand back, desist, give it 6 months. It's all a sensible person could do. That's my proposal.
I think, I mean, I would disagree. These transport policies are very long-term policies, and you don't. I wouldn't see the benefit of waiting 6 months. They can put these policies, these strategies can be amended, can be changed in time. There's also a delivery plan that will sit underneath that, and our LIP program as well sits underneath that, and that's where a lot of these changes are made. And if we had to make drastic changes, we can always make them. You seem to imply that the policy just sits on a shelf and doesn't change. We can make changes if needed. So I think we should be consulting residents. I'm happy to make sure that officers share the consultation draft questions with members of the committee. That's absolutely no problem. I think we normally do that anyways. But I think I'd like us to progress on this is more about the vision of transport for the borough and the importance of having that planning document attached to it, which will give us more weight. We can't really delay and delay and delay until number 10 make up their mind about what transport looks for them. I think we've seen such a lack of leadership from number 10. We don't want to wait for the government. So,
Chair,
the point of order.
So your idea is march over the cliff, is it? That's your idea of leadership. Carry on, bold, no facts, no figures, knowing nothing, and you want to carry on. That's not leadership.
The only ones that do that are the Conservative Party with Brexit, I'm afraid. If I can get a point of order from Councillor Dwight.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think you yourself have said how important this document is. It's for those that are watching but don't know, this is a 114-page document. So it is important that it is discussed. I appreciate that we've been here a long time, but we've been here because residents felt ignored by, frankly, the Lib Dem administration, yourselves as councillors. They had to put petitions in with thousands and thousands of signatures. We've had to speak to those petitions. You have taken your way and we've gone a different way.
What's the point
so my point of order is that we should suspend standing orders so that we can continue to discuss the important items. And that's my proposal. I mean, I think we should have a vote on it.
Officers, can you provide clarity on suspending standing orders?
Isn't it your decision as chair, surely?
Sorry, Chair.
You need to.
Sorry, I was just having a moment with the tech from just there. So the suspension of standing orders. The procedure with committees is that if the business isn't concluded by within 3 hours, or there's essentially an extension of 15 minutes, then the business would need to be taken at a standalone meeting convened within 10 working days. So essentially, the suspension of standing orders doesn't really apply to ordinary committees. It's only really for council. So rather than suspension of standing orders, the option you have tonight, if you don't move on to the next item, would be, and conclude the next item, would be to have another meeting of the Environment and Neighbourhood Committee in the next 2 weeks. That would be the ordinary procedure for the committees. But if members wanted a motion on suspending of standing orders, we could apply that. But as I say, the ordinary procedure would be another meeting.
I mean, I would prefer to discuss it tonight, unless members prefer to have another meeting in the next 2 weeks. I would be more than happy to suspend standing orders and make sure that we debate this and then move on to the next item.
Agree. Thank you.
I would look, Chair, just if we could just get the assent of the committee to do that.
If you could indicate in the chat that we're happy to suspend standing orders, then we will be able to finish both items tonight. Councillor Shields is asking what's the end time if we suspend standing orders?
Sorry, Chair, I didn't catch a moment ago. I don't know if there was a question to me or not. I might have missed it.
There was a question from Councillor Shields asking how long can we go for if we suspend standing orders?
So it's worth you as a committee agreeing to set a limit. So you might want to suggest, a 11:15, 11 o'clock to conclude this item and the next one. But it's really the committee's decision.
11:15 is fine for me, if that's okay for everyone. I would prefer, I know it's late, but I would prefer to discuss it tonight rather than have to reconvene all the officers and everyone in the next 2 weeks. So if 10:45 is acceptable to everyone else, we can do that. There seems to be.
Yeah.
I think there's a majority in favor of continuing until 10:45. So I suggest that we give another 15 until 15:15 on this agenda item, and then we give ourselves half an hour for the climate change one, if that's okay. Given that the request to suspend standing orders came from the opposition, I would love to hear a bit more from them on this matter, and what their views are on the future of transport. We often hear about what you don't like, but we don't know what you do like. So over to one of you. Councillor Dwight?
Yeah, and I'm more than happy to go, thank you. So we come to this item, as I said, really important, 114 pages long. And you're quite right to say that we are not against everything in this document. And there are some really important items. And as I said recently, earlier, in relation to the road closures, if you go about, and I know you are very passionate about some of these things, Councillor Ablan, and I know some of your colleagues are as well. And that's why I was so surprised about the way that you went about them, because in relation to the road closures, if you had gone about it in a different way and ensured that it was resident-led, then actually some of those might have worked out. I mean, I've got a road closure in, that's been there for a while in Ridge Road in my ward, very popular, residents very happy with it. It works, it makes sense. And I know there are other roads across the borough as well where that's the case. And like I said, if we'd approached it differently, as in so many cases with this council, I think we would have actually ended up with a better result. And in this case, that result might have been in your favour, Councillor Ablan. However, we are where we are. One of the key things that I did note from the document, and I want to thank the officers for taking the time to put it together, because like I said, it's a bulky document, is this idea that people, you know, I get that you can walk to a shop, I can nip to the shop down the road from me or up the road from me, and in many cases in our area, in an urban area like we live in, you can do that. What I didn't feel was coming through in the document though is, and it was actually raised by the petitioners earlier and is obviously linked, is that if you have children, and Councillor Green actually made this point really well earlier, if you have children that need to get somewhere, need to be in school, 2 different schools, you know, different side of the borough, you work somewhere else, then actually walking, cycling, taking the buses is probably not an option. And I think there are very, very many cases that across the borough where that isn't being considered at the moment. And so I really plead with you to, like I say, stop looking at the view that people that are using the car could have just walked to the shop or whatever, when that simply isn't the case. The points around concerns over the elderly and the disabled and their car usage has already been made really well. I made the point earlier about consultation, so obviously you're looking to consult on this, and I made the point that your consultation over the LTNs and prior to that over the parking consultation was so badly organised and badly run, and residents are so unhappy with it that I think frankly, there's a lack of trust with this council, and that your consultations are going to be taken seriously, and I think that needs to be taken into account as well. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that I would like to raise before Councillor Sheen does. Yeah, and just very quickly, so in relation to 1.13 of the actual consultation document, I don't know if an officer might prefer to answer this instead, but it says vehicle emissions account for a large portion of overall pollution and air quality issues in the borough. Now, I don't deny that that might be the case, but I just wondered if we had actually had any facts, actually had any figures in relation to that, because it's otherwise a bit of a sweeping statement. I think that's all I've got to comment on. The consultation part is a major part for me, if I'm honest about this. I totally take on board what Councillor McCoy has said in relation to planning. I mean, we've seen firsthand in my part of the borough what a mess Victoria House has been in relation to planning, no thanks to the work of this council. And I think a lot of there is this policy in some areas that, you know, you build properties, you develop, you don't give them parking spaces, and you know, they are miraculously just not going to have cars, and they're going to ride the train or get the bus or whatever. And I think as a council we need to be more mindful that that isn't always the case as well. Yeah, consultation, main point I'd like to make, please.
Okay, so I think there's could have been asked quite quickly. What is the process of consultation? Would be a question, I think, to officers. If officers can respond to that, that'd be good.
Thank you, Chair. It's a supplementary planning document, so the consultation will be carried out in accordance with the council's adopted statement of community involvement, and that's an overarching document which we use to establish all the consultation processes around planning documents, including the local plan, but it also sets the consultation parameters for planning applications. It will be over a 6-week period. And I think the intention is to bring this report back with the feedback from that consultation to an ENN in January, I believe. So there will be, it'll be carried out by the strategic planning team in consultation with the comms team at Sutton, and it would be comprehensive in the same way that we tend to over-consult in our planning communications. We do so on our planning applications, and we did so on the local plan, and we will probably take longer to consult on this than perhaps we are required to by the planning regulations, which stipulate 4 weeks for a supplementary planning document. We're going out for 6 weeks.
Chair, could I come back, please?
I mean, you just had like 10 minutes of speaking, so I don't know if there's. I'd like to see if I can get anyone else to speak if they want to speak before I come back to someone to you as well. Anyone else? We have about 5 minutes, so is any point from anyone else? Any other point? Councillor Shields.
Thank you, Chairman. What really concerns me, and I'll make sure it concerns residents, is really your foreword, which really is a statement of predetermination. What you want, how it's going to be. Planning decisions will have more teeth than the previous document, which that means more power to yourself. Clearly, you are well out of step with the concept of consultation, so we're very concerned that the public will just get stitched up like they have done with so many previous consultations run by your administration. The statement of a community involvement clearly isn't fit for purpose if it gives the results of coming forward with, like the street closures item, when you can only praise in lesser or greater degrees the success of the scheme. Yeah, boring, aren't I? Refresh the emergency response plan. Right, that's okay. Climate emergency response. We want to become London's most sustainable borough. What it should say is, we don't want cars, we just want an incinerator, because that's how the London Borough of Sutton are going. We are bringing in God knows how many more tons of waste to burn for other boroughs. And my favourite is, people should not, or be prevented from, getting in their car for anything less than 3 kilometres. Well, did a little bit of research on that trusted search engine called Google. 3 kilometres is quite a stride, isn't it? It's 4,000 steps. It's the distance of Sutton Railway Station to Rosehill Roundabout. This is what you're promoting, and this is what you will shoehorn and foist onto residents through a skewed, unfair consultation process. And it's our job as the opposition to make sure they know what your consultation process is about, because your foreword is a statement of intent. It's not a statement of consultation. There are too many definites in your statement. You will be making people do what you want to do, cycling, more low traffic neighbourhoods, interconnected. Well, have we not just had the low traffic neighbourhoods residents complaining in their thousands, which are being ignored? What will make you understand? What will make you deviate from this path to do exactly what residents do not want you to do? And it is you, isn't it? You've written the foreword of predetermined conclusions. This is not a consultation. This is a statement of intent.
Thank you, Councillor Shields. You've made your points. I'm going to go to Councillor Whitehead, Councillor Green, Councillor McCoy, and then I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap it up.
Thank you. I'm getting the overwhelming impression that the members of the opposition have not yet the sustainable transport strategy. And in fact, Councillor Shields was a member of the committee when I was chair, when it first came up in 2015. And he'll be well aware of the process of consultation we operated at that time. On that occasion, we had a number of workshops right across the borough, and we went to all the local committees. Well, bearing in mind that the local committees are coming back in again in the near future, there is no reason why we can't have further consultation this time round online via the local committee. So I would suggest that chairs of the local committee might want to put this on their agendas for where the local committees are coming up in the next few months or so. That's very easy to run. And I think this also takes people's minds off the really important things in the strategy, which are to do with promoting better transport in Sutton. And that means trying to bring Tramlink to Sutton, trying to bring the Overground to Sutton, trying to bring metroisation to Sutton, getting better buses for Sutton. That is what people really care about. The number of times I've talked to residents who've asked me, can we please have a bus here? Can't we bring the Overground to Sutton? That's what people are really interested in. And we need to build up that confidence in public transport. Transport is about a mixed economy. It's not just the car. There's a place for electric cars and cars which aren't polluting, but there's also a place for public transport. And I get the overwhelming impression that members of the opposition don't want the public transport to come back. They want it to go away. Well, that's not what's going to happen, because public transport will be a key part of our post-COVID economy. I don't think there's any doubt about that. It may take time to come back, but it will do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Can I go to Councillor Green and then Councillor McCoy?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to put Councillor Whitehead right. I'm a big believer in public transport. I've never spoken out against it, so I'd like that noted. And I'd also like it noted as an independent councillor who cares passionately about the residents of this borough, and I'm sure you would all say the same. I think it is very late. I think we should not be discussing this now or the next item, because it is so late that it is difficult to concentrate, and we are doing the residents of this borough a really great disservice to rush all this through without thinking about it properly. I've read this document, and we're talking about sustainable transport. Well, how can promoting an incinerator that sucks in 700,000 gross vehicle weight tonnes of traffic be sustainable? How can a new incinerator fuel plant that will bring in 1.2 million tonnes of waste in traffic be sustainable? I work in the most polluted ward in this borough, and all you keep on about is the motor car, public transport, da-di-da-di-da. I don't wish to be rude and I don't wish to be unkind, but you need to deal with pollution, and the incinerator and these other big business rate payers, because they bring in a lot of money to the council, millions. You need to deal with them as well. And you're not doing a service to the residents of Beddington North by ignoring it. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you. I will not be voting for this policy.
Thank you. Councillor McCoy?
Thank you. I just wanted to make a few points. I appreciate that the Environment and Neighbourhoods Committee hasn't had the benefit of seeing the work that goes into planning policies and the long documents that we've got quite familiar with and we handle quite well at our committee, nor will they be familiar with the excellent consultation process that has been lauded a number of times as going above and beyond, and local plan in particular received I think more than ever known responses to the consultation because of the work we've done, and our planning officer are very good and experienced at doing that and going out and meeting with residents. First of all, the point is this is a document to go out for consultation. And say what you like, Councillor Shields, you can't deny the facts we've got coming back. We've actually got the list of all the comments on the previous planning policies. But this is for consultation, so this is an opportunity to go out to let residents have their say. So we're putting forward a policy on behalf of the council which meets the council's ambitions to be more sustainable. It's an administration policy, no doubt about that. We want to be greener and better, but we're giving residents the chance to comment on that, as well as all the statutory consultees, the experts as well. So that's the way to do things, is to put them out to consultation and get that feedback rather than reject them before the residents even got a chance to have a look at it. This also worth flagging up that there's a lot of requirements for sustainable measures that are set down in national planning policy and that we are being required to do. But this is an opportunity for us to make them our own and make them applicable to our borough and deliverable. So I think that it would be a shame not to let this go out and let the public see it and have some say on it. It's a long document, but it's an easy read and it's quite clear what we're trying to achieve. If you don't support the idea of sustainable transport, well, that's your decision and that's your personal point. But also, I'm just also seeing some lack of understanding around planning policy and what it does, particularly from Councillor Dwight. So perhaps a little more, we can encourage them to get some training and get involved. Happy to bring you in on that.
Excuse me.
Dwight, you're...
with respect, that's very rude. I served on a planning committee, and frankly, we are head of planning in this borough.
Councillor Dwight, everyone has their chance to speak, and people are entitled to make their comments. So, Councillor McCoy, if you want to wrap up.
Yes, thank you. Well, the point I was making there about that is because members are being accused of things, and actually it's denigrating the work of the officers, which I think is unfair, because the officers have always behaved absolutely above board and in the best interests of the borough. And Victoria House was mentioned, and I know that everybody's working hard to do that. So that was an incorrect statement, and it's against officers as well as members. So that's one of the points I want to make. So I'd like to thank officers. I know there's a huge amount of work gone into this document and because it's been brought across the committees, I know that those officers have been working well together. So I commend this document and I hope that it will be approved to go out to consultation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On that note, I'd like to move to a vote on the recommendation, which is to agree.
Abelan, I'm sorry, but I would like to come back on that. She meant Councillor McCoy mentioned me personally.
Councillor McCoy made an observation about.
She told me to get training.
She made an observation about additional training, which she's entitled to do. You're entitled to disagree on the point she made, and I don't think we need to go to have another discussion around this. She made her point. You might disagree. You probably do. That's fine. I'd like to move on to the recommendation. So the recommendation is to agree the draft sustainable transport strategy 2020-2025 for consultation. If you could indicate in the chat whether you are in favor of going to consultation or against, I'll give you sort of 10 seconds. I think everyone's voted. Do you want to the results of the vote?
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm it was 4 against and 6 in favour.
Thank you very much. So that moves us to the final item on the agenda tonight, which is quite topical and a good follow up on everything we've just discussed today. Thank you, Jennifer, for first of all putting this excellent report together, and for waiting so patiently. Again, I'd love to be able to have a long discussion on this, but we're a bit pressured on time. But I look forward to hearing your presentation and then having a discussion. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, all. So I'd just like to start by thanking the members of this committee and of HEB committee who were part of the member Telscombe Finish group, who have steered this work, especially over the summer as well. I'd also like to thank the organisations who've contributed their views, their suggestions and their helpful challenge during that process, and extend that to the public who gave us their views in the survey responses that they gave us or by attending the events that we held. So last year, Council declared a climate emergency and committed us to becoming a zero carbon borough. The Council contributes around 3% of the borough's total emissions, and this report commits the Council to doing everything it can to continue to reduce those emissions, which it's been doing over a number of years, decades. But this, of course, means that therefore 97% of borough carbon emissions are the responsibility of the wider community, of businesses and other organisations. And so the Council is therefore committing to support and encourage action by everybody in order to achieve these zero carbon ambitions. You'll see that we've set out a potential trajectory to zero carbon, which uses the scatter model, which is set out in Appendix D, and members will note how challenging it will be to achieve that. It is perhaps, though, worth reminding ourselves about why we're doing this, of the challenge that climate change poses. So more and worse, uncomfortably hot summers like the one that we've had this year, which will impact productivity, put a strain on public infrastructure, create drought with our water systems, and cause excess deaths from overheating. Flash flooding will overwhelm our sewer systems, causing the inevitable disruption that flooding does. So we know it's already too late to prevent some of this happening. Climate change is here, but taking rapid action now can halt a global temperature increase of 1.5 degrees Celsius, which the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change tells us that as a world we must avoid. So this environment strategy, so the committee approved back in March 2019. It's been updated, and that's the document you have in Appendix A, to take account of the new carbon commitments. It has a new chapter which includes the asks of others, so including action needed by business and industry, national and international governments, because, as I say, 97% of the borough's emissions are not under the control of the Council. The Climate Emergency Response Plan is an overhaul of the previous action plans that sat beneath each chapter of the environment strategy. This will enable us to take a holistic view across actions and better ensure that we are kind of fully achieving the best of potential that each action can achieve for us. There's a significant number of new actions, and these have been developed following public engagement, the suggestions and contributions of organisations, partners, council services, and also being involved at London-wide work level. So there's a lot of work happening with other boroughs, and we've reviewed a suite of documents. So since lots of councils declared climate emergencies, lots of documents have been produced, lots of toolkits. We've reviewed them to make sure that we are following the best practice in this area. That includes the toolkit that Ashden, a consultancy Ashden, produced together with Friends of the Earth. So the financial cost of achieving zero carbon is likely to be billions of pounds, and this report does not secure any additional funding to do that. Instead, we will continue to lobby for further funding. We will apply for funding that is available, and we will work together across the council and with partners to review budgets to maximise the opportunities to tackle climate change. So the public has told us that they want the council to prioritise planting more trees, building new council homes to a zero carbon standard, continuing to upgrade our street lighting to low energy LED bulbs, and to include sustainable drainage in every road scheme. So those 4 areas will be our main focus, but we will continue to take every opportunity to work across the full range of sustainability areas, because significant action is needed to achieve zero carbon. Transformational action is needed by everyone in every aspect of their lives in order to achieve zero carbon. Finally, I think it's important that we do mention the impact of COVID-19. So clearly it's having an impact on our environment work. Some of this has been touched on already tonight. So we have seen an increase in behaviours that don't support our long-term ambitions. So clearly a reduction in public transport use, an increase in disposable PPE. But kind of on the flip side, fewer people are flying, there's more walking and cycling, people are making more use of parks and green spaces. So we will continue to adapt our plans to deliver in new ways, probably making more use of webinars than we might have done. But I think it is inevitable that in the short term, there will be some impacts because of coronavirus. Thank you, Chair, and of course, happy to take questions from members.
Thank you very much for whizzing through that that presentation very, very well and very clearly. I'm going to go to Councillor Andrew first, who chaired the Task and Finish group, to get his thoughts on the end product, and then a lot of this again is cross-party work, and when we talk about reaching our climate targets, we talked a lot about transport, but another element is buildings, homes, offices, hospitals, and so on and so forth. And I'd love to hear a bit more from Councillor McCoy on this sort of retrofitting building part, which I think is quite important, and some of the work we're starting around that. So first Councillor Andrew, then Councillor McCoy, and then I'll take anyone else.
Thanks a lot, Councillor Abelan. First of all, I want to extend my thanks to Jennifer for really huge efforts on putting this together. I'm sure that's extended from everyone in the Task and Finish group. It was all really well organised. It was all really, especially through COVID, through the summer. So thanks very much. Also like to thank all the other members of the Task and Finish group. I thought we had some really interesting, productive conversations, some really blue sky thinking, some open-mindedness, which I think is what's needed in this issue, because it's, compared to most of the stuff we talk about, it has the potential to make us all feel very powerless, because it is such a huge issue, such an inconvenient truth, as it's phrased, and it's such a tough thing. I do take some heart from the fact that, there's not, obviously we have our differences, but there's not too many things that, all 54, I think, councillors voted that there's a climate emergency. So I do think that while I have some, obviously the political concerns, I do think that there is some coming together, and I hope we can continue to work cross-party on some of the things we as councillors and we as a council can do as, to help tackle the climate emergency, which is so serious. I'm not going to, take the mic and take too long. I'll be really quick. So first, just really want to remind you on the process, because to make it clear what the process has been and why it's come this way. So obviously the environment strategy was published in early 2019. And then in the summer of 2019, there's a petition from Extinction Rebellion, which was passed at full council. And because of that petition about there being a climate emergency, one of the parts of it is producing sort of a zero carbon plan. Now, obviously we look at the environment strategy as well. And the advice from officers was to sort of merge the two to some degree, so you weren't just wasting lots and lots of time completely reinventing the wheel when work had just been done. So that's what the Task and Finish group was doing. There's also loads of online engagement, in-person engagement, and I'm sure there'll be very valid questions as always raised about who's answered and if they're representative, which is always the case, unless you're got the resources of YouGov, you're never going to have, it's always going to be a question of who chooses to fill in the surveys, who reached out for the information, etc. But I do think that there was a lot of really great work from officers on that. And I know lots of us went to those surveys and went to those stalls and understood the sorts of conversations that were happening. So now this new document comes out, and it's not a completely fresh rehash. There's a lot of the environment strategy still stands, just with some updated targets and points relating to zero carbon plan. Really importantly, 3% of the emissions are directly manageable from the council, meaning 97% are not. And in previous council meetings, I've called to account national government on things they could be doing more. I stand by that, but I also acknowledge that there are, firstly, lots of technological advances that we haven't had yet that would need to happen for us to reach, certainly by 2030, even by 2045, to reach carbon neutrality. And we have to accept how much still needs to be done. But also, there's a lot of our own individual behaviours and behaviours of residents, that can be behaviour change, not just in terms of transport, but in terms of all sorts of things, which can lead to lowering Sutton's carbon footprint. And I really hope that all councils will work together to try to champion these things to residents in their wards and sort of remind people, and I've certainly benefited from people doing this to me, reminding people of the sorts of things which can help us get down our carbon footprint. And it's really important, I think, that we try to turn off from, while we of course continue to have political debates about this, we also try to show a united front to residents on the fact that we're not in America, and I say this as an American, and that means that on all sides of the the council chamber, we agree with the urgency of climate change. We can demonstrate that. It's not a political, the facts of climate change are not disputed in Sutton Council, I hope, and therefore we can all, as a united front, talk to residents about changes that can be made and about how we can all try to work together to reduce Sutton's carbon footprint. So that's, I guess, my message. But anyone else having any questions, obviously, feel free to go ahead.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Green and then to Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chair. Page 146, the Council acknowledges there are concerns about the ERF at Beddington and its impact on air quality. I've no doubt it's a state-of-the-art facility and it meets strict guidelines. However, the Environment Agency have agreed waste transfer permits to allow 2.4 million tonnes of waste into the Beddington cluster. And together with all the stuff that comes in from the South London Waste Partnership, that's a hell of a lot of waste coming in by trucks. And then we've got, and Councillor Andrew will remember voting in favour of the Suez incinerator, which will be bringing in, and I have looked all this up, 288,000 tonnes of incinerator fuel a year, which when burnt will put 360 tonnes of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every year. So whilst all this is very laudable with, getting people out of their cars, public transport, looking at one's carbon footprint, as we all must do, I don't disagree with that. What are you going to do about Beddington North and all the pollution in that ward and the air quality? Because you're not going to do anything because they pay millions in business rate and my residents suffer. So as much as I totally agree with the strategy, I want to know what you as an administration are going to do about Beddington Ward, Beddington North, and all the pollution. Please.
Thank you. I don't know if officers want to come back on that point.
So, Chair, I think we've been consulting separately, and I'm sorry to point at this point in the evening to another strategic planning document, but the South London Waste Plan, which went because of lockdown to the Strategy and Resources Committee several months ago. I think it was the end of June's meeting, Chair, where we have worked with our partners in the South London Waste Partnership to produce a plan. We produced a planning consultation as a result of that, and within that is a very clear picture of how a balance of how each borough supports the others is presented. I'm well aware the Beddington North members feel very strongly about recent planning decisions. Councillor Green's just mentioned the Suez application in particular, and all of those are considered very carefully before officers make recommendations about whether or not we should recommend approval. Air quality, of course, we recognise to be an issue. Air quality monitoring has been carried out in Beddington North, and many of the improvements we are seeking to implement, which I trust, Councillor Green, you recognise we are briefing you and your fellow ward members on regularly. We are trying to make sure you are involved in that, is to address some of the issues that you have very clearly, and dare I say it, very tirelessly raised on behalf of your constituents.
Oh, I'm nothing if not tiresome.
No, I said tirelessly.
No. Oh, just a little humour for the late hour.
We should recognise, Chair, that there are very divergent views about the ERF. I don't think tonight we have the time or the opportunity to air those. I think Councillor Green has registered those. Other members tonight have made reference to the ERF. But I think what we're seeking your approval for tonight, as Jennifer summarised very succinctly and ably, is a programme of work, and we're seeking your endorsement for the actions there, which I think the Task and Finish group, as has been outlined, played a major role in, and that includes Councillor Green, because she was a member of that group, I know, and which is a document which we're seeking to use to encourage all parts of our community, our business community, our residents, all the people who play a role in that 97% of carbon emission that is not our direct responsibility as the local authority. But clearly, Chair, we are the community leaders, and our officers, represented here tonight by Jennifer and Matt, and I trust myself too, are fully committed to what has been produced, which I think is a piece of collaborative work with the community. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. I missed Councillor McCoy, so I'll go to Councillor McCoy next if she wants to make a few comments, and then Councillor Whitehead, and then Councillor Dwight.
Thank you, Councillor Abelan. I'll be brief. Just what the key point I want to make is obviously the environment strategy and the response to the climate emergency is not just an Environment and Neighbourhoods Committee problem. It is a whole council issue, which is why HEB has been involved and very keen to help with the delivery of this. I'm delighted that so many of the aims of this strategy are already included in our local planning policies. So we're already working towards that. And the HEB committee, I can assure you, is already trying to deliver some of the aspirations in the documents. Key, what you mentioned about the retrofitting, it was brought to our attention that actually the key way of, one of the biggest impacts we can make on reducing carbon emissions is to retrofit homes in the borough. And we've got a great programme significantly retrofit some council properties, that's council housing properties, with an energy sprung project, which is a whole house intensive retrofitting to make them super energy efficient, which would go a big great project. And also we've one of the things we've been doing, we're looking to do, is to work with businesses to try and encourage them to think, to become greener, to operate more sustainably. And that's a programme of work that we've been pushing to take forward as well. So they're just a couple of small areas that we're trying to do our bit. Obviously through planning, there's a lot of work we can deliver that way. But yeah, I think it's important that we do understand that this is a whole council issue, and even then we're only scratching the surface. And one of the points about the energy sprung project is we had to get funding for that. So if we want to do more, we need to find more funding, and one of the asks in the paper is for the government to fund more. The more it can give us specifically towards projects like that, then the more we can actually deliver on our aspirations. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know from hearing from experts saying that retrofitting would be one of the most important ways to help our economic recovery, create jobs, and build back better, which seems to be the term used now by policymakers and experts. To Councillor Whitehead next.
Thank you, Chair. Of course, members will be aware that the UK is going to be hosting COP26, which is the follow-up to the Paris Agreement. And that's been cancelled to the next few months. It was going to take place this autumn, and it's going to be taking place in Glasgow. And at the moment, the Paris Agreement is for 1.5 degrees, but it looks like the next agreement will have to be to curb the temperature rise even more strictly, which means we need to more urgently find solutions to problems. And we've already mentioned that buildings are very important, and buildings are equally important as emissions from transport. And some members, and I think Jane will remember, we once had a Green Deal Task and Finish group, which I think wasn't in the last administration, but the administration before that. I think what is needed is another new Green Deal. And it's been talked about in the national press that at some stage very soon, we will have to replace all the nation's gas boilers with things like heat pumps, which are far more efficient. And that's going to be a major piece of work that the government needs to pay attention to. And councils such as ours won't be able to do this work without an appropriate lead from government, which we don't seem to be getting. And in order to reach those targets, whether they're 2030, 2045 or 2050, we do need to have an appropriate lead from government, because as Jennifer said, 96% of this comes outside the council's remit.
Thank you for that very good contribution. Councillor Dwight?
Lovely, thank you, Chair. So I agree that this issue is really important. Unfortunately, I was in hospital when it was discussed last summer and the vote was taken. But you can rest assured that as a huge fan of Sir David Attenborough, I would have supported it. There are just a few things I was going to raise. One is in relation to absolutely, Councillor Andrew. So one is in relation to fuel poverty. So obviously that's mentioned within the report. And I just wanted to highlight, not that I'm sure that we need to, but obviously some of the people at the new development in Hackbridge and Esden obviously have had issues with that. And so I think it's incumbent on us as a borough and as a council to make sure that that issue is overcome. Because despite good intentions, it's actually, you know, not worked out as well as we might have, councillors might have hoped for those people. In relation to, I was concerned, and I don't know if Matt was one of the officers or one of the lead members, aware that despite being very, very late, the Beddington Farmlands issue that keeps coming up and is now meant to be delivered, I think it said by 2022, is a massive part of land that's kind of been taken back by the council. I just want to be absolutely clear that no other green spaces across the borough might be lost. Obviously, it says no overall reduction in green space in the borough. Well, if we take on that massive area, is there ever going to be any potential that we might lose